You're being fooled, daily, systematically, by your own brain. You defend beliefs you've never examined. You make decisions driven by invisible biases. You mistake confidence for competence. You're certain about things you barely understand. This costs you, in money, relationships, opportunities, time. You just don't see it because poor thinking is invisible to itself. This book contains one solution: 1 hour daily, 10 practices, 12 months. Question your assumptions. Build bulletproof arguments. Recognize the biases distorting every judgment. Confront beliefs you're afraid to examine. Document your thinking. Practice until clarity becomes automatic. The Thinking Edge. Master your mind 1 hour at a time. Prologue. The crisis of thought in a distracted world. You make approximately 35,000 decisions every day. Most of them are wrong. Not dramatically wrong. Not catastrophically wrong. Just subtly, consistently, expensively wrong. And you don't even notice. You believe things without evidence. You reject ideas without examination. You form conclusions before gathering facts. You mistake correlation for causation, anecdotes for data, feelings for truth. You're surrounded by information, yet starve for understanding. You consume content constantly, yet think critically rarely. This isn't an accident. Your mind wasn't designed for the modern world. It evolved for survival, not truth. For speed, not accuracy. For social cohesion, not logical consistency. Every cognitive shortcut that kept your ancestors alive now leads you astray in decisions about career, relationships, health, money, and meaning. The cost is staggering. Poor decisions compound daily. Bad reasoning builds on itself. Weak thinking creates weak outcomes. You wonder why progress feels elusive, why clarity remains distant, why confidence feels hollow. The answer is simpler than you imagine. You've never learned to think properly. Not thinking positively. Not thinking creatively. Not thinking big. Those matter, but they're meaningless without the foundation. Thinking clearly, rigorously, honestly. Critical thinking isn't a skill you're born with or without. It's a discipline you build through deliberate practice. And like any discipline, it requires time, structure, and repetition. 1 hour daily. That's what this requires. Not to learn tricks or hacks. Not to become a human computer or debate champion, but to develop the single most valuable skill you can possess, the ability to think well about what matters. Consider what clear thinking gives you. It reveals what's true when everyone around you believes lies. It exposes bad arguments dressed as wisdom. It cuts through emotional manipulation. It helps you make decisions you won't regret. It builds confidence based on competence, not delusion. It makes you harder to fool, manipulate, or mislead. Now consider what poor thinking costs you. You stay in situations that damage you because you rationalize rather than analyze. You pursue goals that don't align with your values because you've never examined either. You trust sources that deceive you. You reject ideas that could help you. You waste resources on solutions that don't work. You mistake activity for progress, opinion for knowledge, confidence for competence. The difference between these two paths is entirely learnable. But learning requires commitment, not motivation, commitment. Motivation fluctuates. Commitment persists. You don't need to feel excited about thinking rigorously. You need to do it consistently, especially when it's uncomfortable, especially when it challenges beliefs you cherish, especially when it reveals you've been wrong. This book makes no promises about easy transformation or quick results. Clear thinking isn't achieved through inspiration or revelation. It's built through daily practice of specific mental disciplines. Question your assumptions. Examine your reasoning. Identify your biases. Confront weak arguments. Document your process. Repeat until it becomes automatic. Most people resist this work, not because they're incapable, but because rigorous thinking is uncomfortable. It forces you to admit ignorance. It reveals how often you're wrong. It demands intellectual humility. It requires changing your mind when evidence demands it. These feel like weaknesses. They're actually strengths. The person who can think clearly possesses a superpower in a world drowning in confusion. While others react emotionally, you analyze rationally. While others accept convenient lies, You pursue inconvenient truths. While others cling to positions despite evidence, you adjust beliefs based on reality. This isn't cold or mechanical, it's liberating. You already spend hours daily consuming information, scrolling, reading, watching, listening. But consumption isn't thinking, it's passive absorption. Real thinking is active examination. It's taking ideas seriously enough to test them. It's caring about truth more than comfort. It's building arguments rather than collecting opinions. This book provides a structure for that daily practice. 10 chapters, each focusing on one essential aspect of critical thinking. Each designed to be practiced, not just read. Each building on the previous. Each requiring the same commitment. One focused hour daily. You might ask, why 1 hour? Because less isn't sufficient to build the habit, and more isn't sustainable for most people. 1 hour is enough to make meaningful progress without overwhelming your schedule. It's 4% of your day. If you can't invest 4% of your day in the skill that influences the other 96%, you're not serious about improvement. The world needs better thinkers. Not more thinkers, better ones. People who can distinguish truth from falsehood, reason from rationalization, evidence from anecdote. People who make decisions based on logic rather than impulse. People who can admit when they're wrong and adjust accordingly. That person can be you, not through natural talent or special intelligence, but through disciplined practice. Starting now, starting with 1 hour, starting with the commitment to think better, so you can live better. The choice is yours. You can continue thinking the way you always have, getting the results you always get. Or you can commit to 1 hour daily and discover what your mind becomes when properly trained. This is a motivational speech. It's a challenge. Can you commit to thinking rigorously for 1 hour daily? Can you question what you believe? Can you confront your biases? Can you admit when you're wrong? Can you build arguments that withstand scrutiny? If you can, everything changes. Not overnight, not magically, but systematically, through the compound effect of daily practice. 1 hour of rigorous thinking daily transforms how you perceive reality, make decisions, and navigate complexity. The mind you have is sufficient. The time you need is available. The only question remaining, will you use it? Let's begin. Chapter 1. Dedicate 1 hour daily to question everything. Most people spend their entire lives accepting rather than examining. They inherit beliefs from parents, absorb opinions from culture, adopt positions from peers. They consume information but never interrogate it. They hold convictions but can't explain why. They believe strongly but think weakly. This passive acceptance feels natural because it's effortless. Questioning requires energy. Examination demands focus. Critical thinking is work. So most people avoid it, substituting confidence for competence, certainty for understanding, volume for validity. The cost is invisible until it's devastating. You make a major decision based on flawed assumptions. You trust someone you shouldn't have. You pursue a path that leads nowhere. You believe something false that shapes your entire worldview. And you never realize the problem was your thinking. The habit of inquiry. 1 hour daily dedicated to questioning changes everything. Not questioning for cynicism's sake or to seem intelligent. Questioning to discover what's actually true, to separate belief from knowledge, to identify assumptions masquerading as facts. Start with your own beliefs. What do you believe strongly? Why? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Have you examined both sides fairly? Or have you only consumed information that confirms what you already think? These questions feel threatening because most beliefs don't survive scrutiny. You believe things because someone told you or everyone around you believes it, or it feels right, or accepting it is easier than questioning it. None of these are good reasons, but acknowledging that requires intellectual courage. Intellectual courage means caring more about truth than comfort. It means being willing to discover you're wrong. It means updating beliefs when evidence demands it. Most people lack this courage. They protect their beliefs rather than examine them. They defend positions rather than test them. But you can develop this courage through practice. Each day, take one belief you hold and question it rigorously, not superficially, deeply. What assumptions underlie it? What would prove it false? What alternative explanations exist? Have you considered them fairly? Questions that reveal truth. The quality of your thinking depends on the quality of your questions. Weak questions produce weak thinking. Strong questions force clarity. Weak question, is this true? Strong question, what evidence would prove this false, and have I actively looked for it? Weak question, do I agree with this? Strong question, what's the strongest argument against my position? Weak question, does this feel right? Strong question, what am I feeling, and how is that feeling influencing my reasoning? Most people ask weak questions because they want quick answers. But quick answers are usually shallow answers. Deep understanding requires patient inquiry. It requires sitting with uncertainty. It requires admitting ignorance before claiming knowledge. The cost of unexamined beliefs. Every unexamined belief is a potential liability. It shapes your decisions without your awareness. It filters your perception without your consent. It influences your behavior without your permission. You believe you're logical, but you make decisions emotionally, then rationalize them logically. You believe you're objective, but you seek information that confirms your biases. You believe you're open-minded, but you dismiss ideas that threaten your worldview. These contradictions persist because you've never examined them, and you haven't examined them because questioning yourself is uncomfortable. It's easier to question others. It's easier to spot flaws in opposing arguments than holes in your own reasoning. But intellectual growth requires internal examination. You cannot think clearly about external reality until you think clearly about your internal process. Your biases, assumptions, emotional investments, and reasoning flaws all distort your perception. Identifying them is the first step toward thinking accurately. Building the daily practice. 1 hour daily. No distractions. No multitasking. Just focus questioning. Choose one topic. A belief you hold, a decision you're facing, an argument you've heard, a claim someone made. Then question it systematically. First 15 minutes. Clarify exactly what you believe or what the claim asserts. Define terms precisely. Identify the core assertion. Most confusion stems from vague language and undefined terms. Second 15 minutes. Identify the assumptions. What must be true for this belief to be valid? Are those assumptions justified? Have you examined them? Third 15 minutes. Consider evidence. What supports this belief? What contradicts it? Have you actively sought contradictory evidence or only confirmatory evidence? Final 15 minutes. Test alternative explanations. What other ways could you interpret this evidence? What competing theories exist? Why have you rejected them? This systematic approach prevents lazy thinking. You can't simply accept or reject based on feeling. You must engage with the reasoning process itself. Why most people avoid this? Rigorous questioning is uncomfortable for several reasons. It reveals ignorance. Most people discover they hold strong opinions about topics they barely understand. Admitting this threatens the self-image of competence. It challenges identity. Many beliefs are tied to identity, political, religious, social. Questioning them feels like questioning yourself. It requires changing your mind. After rigorous examination, you may discover you're wrong. Admitting this feels like failure rather than growth. It isolates you from groups. Shared beliefs create social cohesion. Questioning them can create social friction. These are real costs. But compare them to the cost of believing falsehoods, making bad decisions, and living according to unexamined assumptions. The discomfort of questioning is temporary. The damage of poor thinking is permanent. What this practice builds. Daily questioning builds several critical capacities. Epistemic humility, knowing what you don't know, understanding the limits of your knowledge, recognizing when you're speculating versus when you're certain. Intellectual independence, thinking for yourself rather than outsourcing thinking to authorities, tradition, or consensus. Argument recognition, identifying the structure of arguments, seeing premises, conclusions, and the links between them. Bias awareness, recognizing when emotion, identity, or self-interest distorts your reasoning. Comfort with uncertainty, living with I don't know rather than forcing premature certainty. These capacities compound over time. After 30 days of rigorous questioning, You'll notice your thinking becoming sharper. After 90 days, you'll barely recognize your old reasoning patterns. After a year, you'll possess a mental toolkit most people never develop. Starting today, don't wait for perfect conditions or ideal topics. Start with whatever belief you notice yourself defending recently, or whatever claim you heard that everyone accepted without question, or whatever decision you're facing that feels confusing. Take your notebook, write the belief or claim at the top, then spend 1 hour questioning it using the structure provided. No shortcuts. No, I already know this. Assume you don't know, because rigorous examination almost always reveals gaps in understanding. This practice won't feel natural initially. Your mind will resist. You want to stop early or accept easy answers. Push through that resistance. The discomfort means you're engaging with genuine inquiry rather than performing fake skepticism. The transformation. Over time, this daily practice transforms not just what you think, but how you think. You stop accepting claims at face value. You automatically ask about evidence and assumptions. You notice logical fallacies in real time. You become harder to manipulate and easier to convince with good reasoning. More importantly, you develop respect for truth. Not your truth or their truth, but actual truth. What's real regardless of what anyone believes. That respect drives all clear thinking. Without it, thinking becomes merely defending positions rather than discovering reality. 1 hour daily dedicated to questioning everything. That's how you build the foundation of critical thinking. Not through passive learning or accumulating information, but through active interrogation, beliefs, claims, and assumptions. Start today. Question one belief rigorously. Examine it from every angle. Test it against alternatives. Be willing to discover you're wrong. Because a person who questions everything eventually understands what actually matters. And understanding what matters changes everything. Chapter 2. Start your day by challenging your assumptions. Your morning mind is your clearest mind. Before the day's demands, social interactions, and emotional triggers cloud your thinking, you possess a window of relative objectivity. This window closes quickly. Within hours of waking, you're reacting rather than reflecting, defending rather than examining, operating from habit rather than intention. That's why morning is when you challenge assumptions, why your mind is still capable of genuine examination rather than mere rationalization. Why mornings matter for clear thinking. Sleep temporarily resets emotional intensity. The anger, anxiety, or excitement that distorted yesterday's thinking has diminished. You're not yet caught in today's conflicts. This creates optimal conditions for examining beliefs without the fog of immediate emotional investment. Most people waste this clarity. They immediately check devices, consuming information before processing thought. They react to messages before reflecting on priorities. They let external inputs flood their minds before establishing internal clarity. This is backwards. First, establish how you'll think. Then engage with what you'll think about. Starting your day by challenging assumptions establishes a mental framework for everything that follows. You're not just planning activities. You're calibrating your reasoning process. You're reminding yourself that beliefs should be examined, not just held. That assumptions should be identified, not just followed. That thinking clearly requires conscious effort, not default patterns. Identifying hidden assumptions. Assumptions are beliefs you hold without realizing you hold them. They're so deeply embedded in your thinking that they feel like facts rather than interpretations. This makes them dangerous. They shape every conclusion you reach, yet you never examine them. Common hidden assumptions. About yourself: I'm not good at math. I'm an introvert. I'm not creative. These seem like neutral self-descriptions. They're actually limiting assumptions that constrain behavior. About others: people are fundamentally selfish. You can't trust corporations. Authority figures deserve respect. These feel like obvious truths. They're unexamined generalizations about how things work. Hard work leads to success. The system is rigged. Everything happens for a reason. These feel like wisdom. They're untested theories. Each morning, identify one assumption you're operating from. This requires honesty. Most people immediately claim they have no assumptions. That's itself an assumption that you perceive reality directly rather than through interpretive frameworks. The morning assumption challenge. First 10 minutes. Sit quietly without devices. Ask, what did I assume yesterday without examining? Don't accept nothing as an answer. You made decisions, formed judgments, reacted to situations. Each involved assumptions. Second 10 minutes. Write down one assumption you identified. Define it precisely. Make it specific, not vague. Not, I assume people are good, but I assume this specific person has good intentions despite contradictory evidence. Third 10 minutes. Question it. Where did this assumption come from? Parents? Culture? Personal experience? A single incident you generalize from? Is it serving you or limiting you? Fourth 10 minutes. Consider alternatives. What if the opposite were true? What if the situation is more complex than your assumption suggests? What evidence contradicts your assumption? Fifth 10 minutes. Decide consciously. After examination, you might keep the assumption, but now at a conscious belief, not an unexamined habit. Or you might revise it, creating space for more accurate thinking. Final 10 minutes. Set an intention. How will you test this assumption today? What will you notice? How will you remain aware of it operating in your thinking? Why this is difficult. Challenging assumptions threatens your sense of certainty. Certainty feels good. It reduces anxiety, speeds decisions, and projects confidence. But false certainty is dangerous. It leads to systematic errors that compound over time. Most people prefer comfortable certainty over uncomfortable accuracy. They'd rather feel sure than be correct. This preference keeps them trapped in limiting assumptions, repeating the same thinking patterns, getting the same unsatisfying results. Intellectual maturity means prioritizing accuracy over comfort. It means being willing to say, I assume that, but maybe I'm wrong. It means treating uncertainty as information rather than weakness. This morning practice builds that maturity. Each day, you practice questioning what feels certain. Each day, you strengthen your ability to examine rather than merely accept. Each day, you become someone who thinks clearly rather than someone who merely thinks confidently. Assumptions about thinking itself. The deepest assumptions concern thinking itself. Most people assume, I'm rational. You're not. You rationalize emotional conclusions. I'm objective. You're not. You're biased in ways you don't recognize. I see things clearly. You don't. Perception is always interpretation. My memory is reliable. It's not. Memory is reconstruction, not recording. I know why I do things. You don't. Motivation is often unconscious. These meta-assumptions about your cognitive abilities are the most important to challenge. They determine whether you even recognize when you're thinking poorly. Each morning, remind yourself, my mind is a tool that needs calibration. Without regular checking, it drifts toward bias, laziness, and error. This morning practice is that calibration. The compound effect. One challenge assumption daily seems minor. Over a year, that's 365 examined beliefs. Compare this to most people who might consciously examine 0 assumptions annually. This compounds rapidly. Challenge assumptions connect. Questioning one belief reveals others. You start recognizing patterns in your thinking. You identify recurring biases. You see how assumptions cluster around insecurities, identities, and unprocessed experiences. After 3 months of morning assumption challenges, you'll notice faster recognition when you're making assumptions in real time, less defensiveness when others question your thinking, more curiosity about alternative perspectives, greater comfort with uncertainty and complexity, better decisions based on examined reasoning rather than automatic reactions. Practical application. Let's trace how one morning assumption challenge affects an entire day. Morning. You identify your assumption. My boss is micromanaging me because he doesn't trust my competence. Challenge. Where did this come from? Has he said this? Or are you interpreting behavior through insecurity? What alternative explanations exist? Maybe he's stressed about results and monitoring everyone closely. Maybe he micromanages regardless of trust. Maybe you're misreading normal management as micromanagement. New approach. I assume distrust, but I don't actually know his motivation. Today I'll gather information rather than react from assumption. Throughout the day, instead of resenting his oversight, you ask questions. You discover he's under pressure from executives and monitoring all projects closely. Your assumption was wrong. It wasn't about you. Result: better working relationship, reduced stress, more accurate perception. All because you challenged one assumption that morning. This pattern repeats across every domain: relationships, health decisions, career moves, financial choices. Examined assumptions lead to better outcomes. Unexamined assumptions lead to systematic errors. The morning commitment. Most people resist this practice initially. They claim they have no time, no assumptions, or no need. These are excuses protecting unexamined thinking. The truth: you have 1 hour. You have numerous assumptions. You need this practice unless you believe your current thinking produces optimal results. Commit to 60 mornings. Challenge one assumption daily. Write it down. Question it rigorously. Consider alternatives. Make conscious choices. After 60 days, evaluate. Is your thinking clearer? Are your decisions better? Are you less reactive and more reflective? The answer will be obvious. And you'll realize that morning mental clarity isn't luck. It's discipline. It's the daily practice of examining rather than accepting, questioning rather than assuming, thinking rather than reacting. Start tomorrow morning. Before checking your phone, before consuming information, before engaging with the world, challenge one assumption. Make it specific. Question it honestly. Let that clarity guide your entire day. Because the person who starts each day by examining their thinking eventually sees reality more accurately than those who never pause to question what they assume. An accurate perception is the foundation of every good decision you'll ever make. Chapter 3. Focus your analysis on what actually matters. Information abundance has created analysis paralysis. You're drowning in data, opinions, news, studies, and content. Everyone claims their information is crucial. Everything demands your attention. The result: you analyze everything superficially rather than anything deeply. This is exactly backwards. Deep analysis of what matters beats shallow analysis of everything. Yet most people never develop the ability to distinguish signal from noise, substance from distraction, important from merely urgent. Your analytical capacity is finite. Your attention is limited. Your time is scarce. Every hour spent analyzing irrelevant information is an hour not spent understanding what actually shapes your outcomes. The skill of focusing analysis on what matters is perhaps the most practical application of critical thinking. The signal-to-noise problem. Modern life generates overwhelming noise. News cycles amplifying trivial events. Social media highlighting outrage over insight. Marketing disguised as information. Opinions masquerading as analysis. Correlation presented as causation. Anecdotes substituting for data. Within this noise exist actual signals, information that accurately represent reality and meaningfully impacts your decisions. But signals are quieter than noise. They're less emotionally engaging. They require more effort to process. They don't spread virally because they're complex rather than simplistic. Most people never develop signal detection skills. They consume whatever appears loudest, most frequently, or most aligned with existing beliefs. They mistake popularity for validity, emotional intensity for importance, and consensus for truth. The consequence: their analysis focuses on whatever captures attention rather than whatever actually matters. They think deeply about celebrity scandals while thinking shallowly about career decisions. They analyze political theater while ignoring economic fundamentals. They debate hypotheticals while avoiding concrete problems. Identifying what actually matters. Start by defining matters precisely. What matters is whatever significantly influences outcomes you care about. For personal decisions, what factors actually determine success or failure? Not what you think should matter or what everyone discusses, but what empirically, demonstrably affects results. Example: choosing a career path. What matters? Actual skill requirements, not just credentials. Industry growth trajectory, not just current salary. Alignment with your capabilities, not just your interests. Realistic progression timelines, not just peak earning potential. What doesn't matter as much as people think? Prestige, unless specifically relevant to your goals. What others expect, unless they're funding your life. Single data points about someone's experience. Short-term market fluctuations. For understanding issues, what factors actually drive the phenomenon? Not what's emotionally satisfying to believe or politically convenient to claim, but what evidence demonstrates. Example, understanding crime rates. What matters? Actual data on crime trends, not sensationalized news. Demographic and economic factors with proven correlations. Methodologically sound studies, not cherry-picked statistics. Long-term patterns, not short-term anomalies. What doesn't matter as much as people think? Individual anecdotes, which can establish patterns. Politicians' claims, which serve political goals. What everyone knows, which is often wrong. Your gut feeling about causes. The focusing framework. Use this structure to focus your analysis. Step 1. Define the decision or question precisely. Vague. Should I change careers? Precise. Given my current skills, financial obligations, and 5-year goals, does transitioning to industry X make sense now? Step 2. Identify factors that significantly impact outcomes. What variables actually move the needle? Not what might matter theoretically, but what demonstrably affects results in similar situations. Step 3. Gather quality information on those factors. Quality over quantity. 1 excellent source beats 10 mediocre ones. Primary data beats secondary interpretation. Systematic evidence beats casual observation. Step 4. Ignore everything else. This is the hardest part. Endless information tangentially relates to any topic. Most of it doesn't matter. Discipline analysis means deliberately excluding available information that doesn't significantly impact your understanding or decision. Step 5. Analyze depth, not breadth. Once you've identified what matters, go deep. Understand mechanisms, not just correlations. Identify causal chains. Question assumptions. Test alternative explanations. 1 hour of deep analysis beats 10 hours of shallow consumption. Evidence versus emotion. The primary obstacle to focus analysis is emotion. Emotional information captures attention. It feels significant. It generates strong reactions. It spreads socially. But emotional intensity doesn't equal actual importance. The most emotionally engaging information is often the least useful for making good decisions. High emotion, low importance. Outrage-inducing news stories about rare events. Dramatic anecdotes that don't represent patterns. Hypothetical scenarios designed to trigger reactions. Personal attacks in political debates. Low emotion, high importance. Trend data showing gradual shifts. Methodological details in studies. Base rates and statistical context. Structural factors underlying surface events. Focus analysis requires conscious emotional regulation. You must notice when you're drawn to information because it's engaging rather than because it's important. You must recognize when outrage or excitement is directing your attention away from what actually matters. This doesn't mean ignoring emotion entirely. Emotion provides valuable data about your values and concerns, but it means not letting emotional intensity determine analytical focus. The time allocation test. Here's a diagnostic test. Track where you spend your analytical time for 1 week. Calculate how many hours did you spend thinking about, reading about, or discussing celebrity news, entertainment gossip, or viral content, political commentary and debate versus policy details, hypothetical scenarios and thought experiments, other people's drama and conflicts, things you can't influence or control. Compare to how many hours analyzing, your own decisions and their likely outcomes, skills you need to develop, financial choices and their long-term impacts, relationship patterns and dynamics, health behaviors and their consequences. For most people, the ratio is shocking. They spend 10 times more mental energy on what doesn't matter than what does. They know more about politicians' personalities than their own biases. They can debate abstract philosophical questions, but can't analyze their own decision patterns. Focus analysis means deliberately inverting this ratio. Spend 80% of analytical time on what significantly impacts your outcomes. Allocate 20% to everything else, including staying informed but not obsessed about broader events. Building the focus habit. 1 hour daily. Focus exclusively on analyzing what matters. Monday, analyze one upcoming decision using the focusing framework. What actually determines success or failure? What information do you need? What's just noise? Tuesday, review one recent decision. What factors mattered most? Did you analyze them deeply? What distracted you from what mattered? Wednesday, analyze one belief about how something works. What evidence supports it? Is that evidence about what matters or what's merely visible? Thursday, identify one topic you discuss frequently. Does it actually matter to your outcomes? Or are you analyzing it because it's socially engaging? Friday, deep dive on one high-impact factor in your life. Career trajectory, health behaviors, financial decisions, key relationships. Pick one and analyze it thoroughly. Weekend, apply focus analysis to one current event or issue. Move past headlines. Find primary sources. Understand mechanisms. Distinguish what matters from what's just interesting. What this builds. Consistent focus analysis develops several crucial capacities. Discernment, rapidly distinguishing important from trivial. Signal from noise, substance from distraction. Depth, ability to analyze thoroughly rather than superficially. Understanding mechanisms rather than just noting correlations. Discipline, resisting the gravitational pull of emotionally engaging but analytically useless information. Efficiency, getting better insights from less information by focusing on quality and relevance. Results, making better decisions because your analysis focuses on factors that actually determine outcomes. The transformation. After 3 months of focus analysis practice, you'll notice less anxiety about missing information. You're confident you focus on what matters. Better decisions because you analyze deeply what actually affects outcomes. More time because you're not consuming endless content. Greater clarity about causes and effects in your life. Reduce distraction by what everyone else obsesses over. This creates a powerful advantage. While others analyze everything superficially, you analyze what matters deeply. While others react to noise, you respond to signals. While others drown in information, you extract insight from focus analysis. 1 hour daily. Focus exclusively on what actually matters to your decisions and outcomes. Not what's interesting. Not what's popular. Not what's emotionally engaging. What actually, demonstrably, significantly matters. That discipline transforms your thinking from scattered precise, from reactive to strategic, from overwhelmed to clear. Start today. Identify one thing that matters to a current decision. Spend 1 hour analyzing it deeply. Ignore everything else. That focused hour will teach you more than 10 hours of scattered consumption ever could. Chapter 4. Construct arguments that withstand scrutiny. Most people don't build arguments. They accumulate opinions. They collect beliefs that feel right, sound good, or align with identity. When challenged, they don't defend with logic, but with volume, emotion, or dismissal. They mistake confidence for correctness, conviction for proof, and passion for validity. This intellectual weakness has consequences. Weak arguments lead to weak decisions. If you can't construct sound reasoning for your positions, you can't distinguish good ideas from bad ones. You become easy to manipulate, quick to deceive yourself, and unable to solve complex problems. Strong arguments are your defense against confusion and error. They're how you navigate complex decisions, evaluate competing claims, and reach reliable conclusions. Building them requires discipline, structure, and honest self-examination. What makes an argument sound? An argument is not just a claim or opinion. It's a logical structure connecting premises to conclusions. Sound arguments have 3 essential qualities. 1. Valid structure. The conclusion follows logically from premises. If the premises are true, the conclusion must be true. Example of valid structure. Premise 1. All decisions made without examining assumptions contain hidden risks. Premise 2. This decision was made without examining assumptions. Conclusion. Therefore, this decision contains hidden risks. The conclusion follows necessarily. Even if you disagree with the premises, you must acknowledge the logical connection. Example of invalid structure. Premise 1, successful people wake up early. Premise 2, I wake up early. Conclusion, therefore, I will be successful. This is invalid. The conclusion doesn't follow. Successful people waking early doesn't mean all early risers become successful. The logic is broken. 2. True premises. The starting points must be accurate. Valid logic built on false premises produces false conclusions. Example, Premise 1, all billionaires dropped out of college. False, most didn't. Premise 2, I want to be a billionaire. Conclusion, therefore, I should drop out of college. The logic is valid, but the premise is false, making the conclusion unreliable. 3. Relevant premises. The starting points must actually relate to the conclusion. Irrelevant truths don't support conclusions. Example, Premise 1, exercise improves physical health. True. Premise 2, I want to improve my finances. Conclusion, therefore I should exercise more. The premise is true, but irrelevant to the conclusion about finances. Building from the ground up. Construct arguments systematically. Step 1. State the conclusion clearly. What exactly are you arguing? Not vaguely, but precisely. I should change careers is too vague. I should transition from current role to industry X within 6 months is specific. Step 2. Identify necessary premises. What must be true for this conclusion to be valid? List each assumption explicitly. For career change, industry X has growth trajectory that matches my timeline. My skills transfer to industry X with minimal retraining. The financial risk is acceptable given my savings and obligations. Step 3. Examine each premise. Is it actually true? What evidence supports it? What evidence contradicts it? Are you certain or assuming? Step 4. Check the logical connections. Do the premises actually support the conclusion? Or are you jumping to conclusions based on desired outcome rather than logical necessity? Step 5. Consider counterarguments. What's the strongest case against your conclusion? Can you address it? Or does it reveal flaws in your reasoning? Common logical fallacies. Most weak arguments contain identifiable errors. Learning to recognize these in your own thinking is essential. Confirmation bias. Seeking only evidence that supports your conclusion while ignoring contradictory evidence. Example, I've decided to start this business. Look at all these success stories. While ignoring failure rates and challenges. False dichotomy. Presenting only 2 options when more exist. Example, either I accept this job offer or I stay stuck in my current role forever. Ignoring other job opportunities, skill development, career pivots, etc. Appeal to emotion. Using feelings to support conclusions rather than evidence. Example, I'm passionate about this, so it must be the right choice. Passion doesn't guarantee success or rightness. Ad hominem. Attacking the person making an argument rather than the argument itself. Example, you can't trust his financial advice, he's not wealthy. His wealth is irrelevant to whether his logic is sound. Hasty generalization. Drawing broad conclusions from insufficient evidence. Example, I tried working out for 2 weeks and didn't see results, so exercise doesn't work for me. Too small a sample, too short time frame. Circular reasoning, using the conclusion as a premise. Example, I'm right because I'm always right about these things. The conclusion is assumed in the premise. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, assuming causation from correlation. Example, I started the supplement and my energy improved, so the supplement works. Ignoring other factors like improved sleep, reduced stress, seasonal changes, placebo effect. Slippery slope. Claiming one action inevitably lead to extreme outcomes without justification. Example, if I let myself take 1 day off of my routine, I'll completely lose all discipline forever. One deviation doesn't guarantee total collapse. Straw man. Misrepresenting an opposing argument to make it easier to attack. Example, people who suggest work-life balance just want to be lazy. Misrepresenting the actual argument for balance. Stress testing your arguments once you build an argument. Attack it yourself. This seems counterintuitive. Why undermine your own position? Because if your argument can't withstand your own scrutiny, it certainly won't withstand reality. The devil's advocate protocol. Spend 15 minutes building your strongest argument for a position. Then spend 15 minutes building the strongest possible counterargument, not a weak version. The actual best case against your position. If your original argument survives this process, you can hold it with genuine confidence. If it doesn't, you've saved yourself from acting on flawed reasoning. Most people resist this. They want to believe their initial thinking is correct. They experience cognitive dissonance when finding flaws in their own reasoning. They'd rather defend weak arguments than build strong ones. But intellectual integrity requires this discipline. You must care more about having sound reasoning than about being right without effort. The Socratic method in practice, the ancient practice of systematic questioning, remains the most powerful tool for testing arguments. When examining any claim, your own or others, apply the sequence. Question 1. What exactly does this claim assert? Force precision. This is good becomes this produces outcome X, which I value because Y. Question 2. What evidence supports this? Require specifics. Everyone knows or studies show aren't sufficient. Which studies? What methodology? What sample size? Question 3. What alternative explanations exist? Challenge the uniqueness of your explanation. Could other factors account for the observed effect? Question 4. What would prove this false? If nothing could prove it false, it's not a testable claim. It's unfalsifiable belief masquerading as argument. Question 5. What are the strongest objections? If you can't articulate powerful counterarguments, you don't understand the topic deeply enough to hold a confident position. Building practical arguments for real decisions, abstract logic matters, but most arguments serve practical decision-making. Here's how to construct sound arguments for actual choices. Career decision example. Weak argument. I should take this job because it pays more and I'm excited about it. Strong argument. Premise 1. My 5-year goal requires developing skills X, Y, Z. Premise 2. This role provides structured opportunity to develop X and Y, but not Z. Premise 3. The compensation increase of 20% accelerates my financial timeline by 18 months. Premise 4. Alternative roles either pay less or don't develop X and Y as effectively. Premise 5. I can develop skill Z through side projects or later roles. Conclusion. Therefore, accepting this role aligns with my strategic goals despite not being perfect. This argument is stronger because it connects to defined objectives, not just excited. It acknowledges trade-offs, not Z skill development. It considers alternatives, not just yes/no binary. It provides measurable criteria, 20% increase, 18-month acceleration. It addresses the gap, plan for Z skill development. Written argument development writing forces clarity that mental reasoning alone doesn't achieve. Use the structure. 1-hour argument construction. Minutes 0 to 10. Write your conclusion at the top. Below it, list every premise you believe supports it. Minutes 10 to 20. Examine each premise individually. Mark as definitely true, probably true, assumed, or uncertain. Minutes 20 to 30. For any premise not marked definitely true, gather evidence or acknowledge the assumption explicitly. Minutes 30 to 40. Write the strongest counterargument you can construct. Be genuinely adversarial to your own position. Minutes 40 to 50. Address the counterargument. Can you refute it with evidence? Must you modify your conclusion? Should you change your position? Minutes 50 to 60. Rewrite your argument incorporating what you learned. The final version should be stronger than your initial thinking. Why most people can't do this process is uncomfortable for several reasons. Ego protection. Finding flaws in your reasoning feels like admitting stupidity rather than demonstrating wisdom. Efficiency illusion. Systematic argument construction feels slow compared to intuitive judgment. But intuitive judgment is often wrong. Systematic thinking prevents costly errors, complexity aversion. Sound arguments acknowledge nuance, trade-offs, and uncertainty. Simple arguments feel more satisfying even when they're wrong. Social pressure. Strong arguments might contradict group consensus, requiring social courage to maintain. These obstacles are real, but they're no excuse for poor reasoning. Overcoming them is part of intellectual maturity. The compound effect: build one rigorous argument daily for 30 days. You'll notice week 1, frustration. The process feels slow and reveals how often you jump to conclusions. Week 2, recognition. You start noticing logical fallacies in real time, both in your thinking and others. Week 3, confidence. Your positions become more defensible because they're based on sound reasoning. Week 4, transformation. You stop holding opinions you can't justify and start constructing beliefs you can defend. After 30 days, this becomes natural. You automatically think in premises and conclusions. You instinctively check for logical fallacies. You build sound arguments without conscious effort. Application to complex problems. The real power of argument construction appears in complex problem solving. When facing multifaceted challenges, break them into component arguments. Complex problem. Should I start a business while employed, quit to focus full-time, or wait until more prepared? Component arguments. Argument A. Current employment provides financial safety net worth preserving during business launch. Build full argument with premises about runway needs, risk tolerance, opportunity cost. Argument B. Business requires full-time focus to succeed in current market conditions. Build full argument with premises about competition, timing, resource requirements. Argument C. Waiting until more prepared is procrastination disguised as prudence. Build full argument with premises about readiness indicators, perfectionism patterns. Examine each argument independently, then evaluate how they interact. This structured approach prevents the mental paralysis that complex decisions often create. The daily practice: Monday through Friday, construct one rigorous argument. Monday, argue for a decision you're facing. Tuesday, argue for a position you hold on a complex issue. Wednesday, argue against a belief you're confident about. Thursday, reconstruct someone else's argument charitably, then critique it. Friday, build the strongest argument you can for something you disagree with. This variety develops flexibility. You're not just reinforcing existing beliefs. You're learning to construct and evaluate arguments from multiple perspectives. The transformation strong argument construction changes how you engage with ideas. You stop accepting claims at face value. You stop defending positions you can't justify. You stop being swayed by emotional appeals that lack logical foundation. More importantly, you become someone whose positions are reliable. When you say you believe something, people know you've thought it through. When you make a recommendation, they trust your reasoning process. When you change your mind, they respect your intellectual integrity. This reputation for sound thinking becomes one of your most valuable assets. Professionally, personally, and intellectually, 1 hour daily spent constructing arguments that withstand scrutiny. Not just collecting opinions or defending positions, but actually building logical structures that connect evidence to conclusions through valid reasoning. Start today. Choose one position you hold. Spend 1 hour building the strongest possible argument for it, then attacking it, then rebuilding it stronger. That discipline transforms you from someone who has opinions to someone who constructs knowledge. Chapter 5. Learn one cognitive bias each day. Your brain is not designed for truth. It's designed for survival. Every cognitive shortcut that helped your ancestors survive now systematically distorts your perception of reality. You don't see the world as it is. You see the world through a filter of biases, heuristics, and mental shortcuts that feel like clear perception but are actually sophisticated self-deception. The problem isn't that you have biases. Everyone does. The problem is that you don't know which ones are operating at any given moment. They're invisible to you, shaping every judgment, decision, and conclusion while remaining completely outside your awareness. You cannot eliminate cognitive biases, but you can recognize them. And recognition transforms bias from invisible puppet master to visible factor you can account for in your reasoning. Why bias awareness matters: consider a typical day of decision-making. Morning. You check email and immediately feel stressed by a negative message, negativity bias. You spend 3 hours worrying about this one message while barely noticing 5 positive messages, loss aversion and availability heuristic. Afternoon. You evaluate 2 job candidates. You prefer the first one you interviewed because they reminded you of a successful colleague, anchoring effect and halo effect. The second candidate was objectively more qualified, but your first impression already set your standard, confirmation bias. Evening. You resist starting a new health routine because you tried something similar once and it failed, availability heuristic and overgeneralization. You convince yourself you're too busy, even though you spend 2 hours scrolling, present bias and rationalization. In each case, bias operated invisibly. You didn't think, I'm being biased. You thought, I'm perceiving reality accurately. That's what makes cognitive biases dangerous. They feel like clear thinking. The learning framework: 1 cognitive bias per day. Study deeply. Day 1 to 30. Learn and identify 1 bias daily. Day 31 to 60. Review previous biases and catch them in real time. Day 61 to 90. Develop compensation strategies for your most problematic biases. This systematic approach builds comprehensive bias awareness. After 90 days, you'll recognize most common biases operating in yourself and others. Month 1. Core cognitive biases. Day 1. Confirmation bias. The tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information that confirms existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. Recognition exercise. Identify 1 belief you hold strongly. Spend 30 minutes actively searching for evidence against it. Notice how uncomfortable this feels. That's confirmation bias resisting. Day 2. Availability heuristic. Judging probability or frequency based on how easily examples come to mind rather than actual statistical likelihood. Recognition exercise. List your top 3 fears. Research actual statistical risk for each. Notice the gap between perceived and actual danger. Day 3. Anchoring effect. Over-rely on the first piece of information encountered, the anchor, when making decisions. Recognition exercise. Before negotiating anything today, notice what number gets introduced first. Observe how it influences your perception of reasonable outcomes. Day 4. Sunk cost fallacy. Continuing investment in something because of past investment, even when continuing is irrational. Recognition exercise. Identify 1 thing you're continuing solely because you've already invested time/money/effort. Calculate whether continuing serve your future or just your past. Day 5. Dunning-Kruger effect. Low-ability individuals overestimating their competence. High-ability individuals underestimating theirs. Recognition exercise. List 3 areas where you consider yourself knowledgeable. For each, list 10 things you don't know about that area. Notice how much exists outside your awareness. Day 6. Fundamental attribution error. Attributing others' behavior to character while attributing your own behavior to circumstances. Recognition exercise. Think of someone who frustrated you recently. List situational factors that might explain their behavior. Then consider times you behaved similarly due to circumstances. Day 7. Hindsight bias. Believing past events were more predictable than they actually were. I knew it all along. Recognition exercise. Recall a prediction you made that was wrong. Notice how you now reconstruct it as obvious, rather than acknowledging your uncertainty at the time. Days 8 to 30. Continue with 1 bias daily. Recency bias, status quo bias, bandwagon effect, halo effect, horn effect, negativity bias, optimism bias, pessimism bias, self-serving bias, false consensus effect, projection bias, in-group bias, out-group homogeneity, mere exposure effect, framing effect, contrast effect, decoy effect, endowment effect, loss aversion, present bias, planning fallacy, and omission bias. Month 2. Recognition in real-time learning about biases intellectually is insufficient. You must catch them operating in real time. This requires active monitoring. Morning review, 10 minutes. Which biases am I likely to experience today based on my plans? What decisions am I facing? Which biases typically affect those decisions? Midday check, 5 minutes. Which biases operated so far today? What did I notice? What did I miss initially? Evening analysis, 15 minutes. Review 3 decisions or judgments made today. Which biases likely influenced each? How might my thinking have differed if I'd compensated for those biases? The discomfort of recognition. When you start catching biases in real time, you'll feel unsettled. You're discovering that much of what felt like clear perception was actually distorted processing. This is good. It's the beginning of intellectual humility. Common patterns after 30 days of bias learning. Certain patterns emerge. Your personal bias profile. Everyone has biases that operate more strongly. Some people are highly susceptible to social proof, bandwagon effect, conformity. Others primarily experience temporal biases, present bias, planning fallacy. Identify your strongest biases. Contextual triggers. Biases intensify under specific conditions. Time pressure increases reliance on heuristics. Emotional arousal amplifies confirmation bias and availability heuristic. Fatigue reduces ability to compensate for biases. High stakes paradoxically increase certain biases, loss aversion, sunk cost. Bias interactions. Multiple biases often operate simultaneously. Compounding distortion. Confirmation bias plus availability heuristic equals seeking easily recalled examples that support existing beliefs. Anchoring plus status quo bias equals resistance to changing from initial position. Dunning-Kruger plus overconfidence equals confident incompetence. Compensation strategies. Knowing about biases is necessary but insufficient. You must develop strategies to compensate. For confirmation bias, deliberately seek disconfirming evidence before concluding. Assign someone the role of disagreeing with your position. Write the strongest argument against your belief before finalizing it. For availability heuristic, look up base rates before judging probability. Record actual frequencies rather than relying on memory. Actively consider less memorable but equally likely scenarios. For anchoring, generate your own number before hearing others. Consider multiple reference points, not just the first. Deliberately think of extreme anchors in both directions to neutralize the effect. For sunk cost, decide based on future outcomes, not past investment. Ask, would I choose this if I were starting fresh today? Separate past investment, already gone, from future potential, still available. For present bias, use commitment devices that constrain future choices. Visualize long-term outcomes vividly to make them feel more present. Establish systems that make good choices easier than bad ones. The Daily Bias Journal keep a running record. Bias identified. Name of bias context. Where / when operated, how it manifested. Specific thought or behavior influence cost. What did this bias potentially cost me in accuracy, decision quality, or outcomes? Compensation strategy. What could I do differently next time? This journal serves two purposes. It builds awareness through repetition and creates a personalized reference of your bias patterns. Month 3. Integration by day 60. Bias recognition becomes more automatic. Month 3 focuses on integration. Week 9 to 10. Focus on decision-making. Before every significant decision, systematically check the 5 biases most likely to affect this type of decision. Week 11 to 12. Focus on belief examination. Choose 3 strongly held beliefs and analyze which biases might be reinforcing them despite contradictory evidence. Week 13. Create your personal bias defense system, a checklist or protocol you will use for important decisions going forward. Why this is difficult. Bias awareness threatens several psychological needs. Need for certainty. Recognizing biases means acknowledging that your perception is unreliable. This creates uncomfortable uncertainty. Need for consistency. Seeing your own biases reveals contradictions in your thinking. This challenges your sense of internal consistency. Need for competence. Catching yourself being biased feels like discovering competence rather than developing wisdom. Need for positive self-image. Many biases serve ego protection. Recognizing them means seeing yourself less favorably. These needs are real, but satisfying them through denial rather than awareness keeps you trapped in distorted thinking. Intellectual maturity means tolerating the discomfort of recognizing your cognitive limitations. The transformation after 90 days of systematic bias learning and recognition. Better decisions. You compensate for biases that previously distorted your judgment invisibly. Greater humility. You recognize how often you're probably wrong even when feeling certain. Improve relationships. You attribute others' behavior more charitably when you recognize fundamental attribution error. Reduced. Manipulation. You recognize when others use bias-exploiting tactics, anchoring in negotiation, social proof in marketing, scarcity in sales. Enhance metacognition. You think about your thinking more accurately, recognizing when cognitive processes are reliable versus unreliable. The daily practice 1 hour daily for 90 days, days 1 to 30. Learn one new bias daily through reading examples and recognition exercises, days 31 to 60. Review and catch biases in real time through morning planning, midday checks, and evening analysis, days 61 to 90. Integrate bias awareness into decision-making and belief examination through systematic protocols. This structured progression builds comprehensive bias awareness that becomes automatic. You'll never eliminate biases. That's neurologically impossible. But you'll recognize them operating, compensate for them consciously, and make substantially better decisions as a result. Start today. Learn one cognitive bias. Not superficially, deeply. Read about it. Find examples in your own recent thinking. Notice it operating in real time if possible. Write about how it influenced a specific decision or judgment. Tomorrow, learn another one. Repeat for 90 days to be by the end. You'll possess something rare and valuable. Accurate awareness of how your mind actually works, including all the ways it systematically deceives you. That awareness is a foundation of clear thinking, because you cannot think accurately about reality until you understand how your perception distorts reality. Chapter 6. Exercise your mind through deliberate analysis. Your mind is a muscle, like physical muscles. It strengthens through resistance and atrophies through disuse. But unlike physical training, mental training lacks obvious feedback. You don't see analytical muscles growing. You don't feel cognitive strength increasing. The improvement is invisible until suddenly you notice problems that once seemed impossible now feel manageable. This invisibility causes most people to never train their analytical capacity systematically. They think occasionally about complex problems, but that's like occasionally doing push-ups, insufficient for building real strength. Deliberate analytical practice means systematically engaging with problems specifically designed to stretch your thinking capacity. Not problems you can solve easily. Not problems you can't solve at all. Problems at the edge of your current capability. Difficult enough to require full mental effort. Achievable enough to eventually solve. The training principle, physical training, follows a clear principle: progressive overload. You gradually increase resistance, forcing muscles to adapt. Mental training requires the same approach. Week 1 to 2. Analyze problems at your comfortable capability level to establish baseline and build consistency. Week 3 to 4. Increase complexity, multiple variables, longer causal chains, more ambiguous information. Week 5 to 6. Add time pressure and constraint, forcing faster analysis without sacrificing accuracy. Week 7 to 8. Tackle problems outside your expertise, forcing you to build frameworks from scratch. Week 9 to 10. Analyze real-world cases with incomplete information and uncertainty. Week 11 to 12. Create your own complex problems and solve them, developing both problem-finding and problem-solving skills. This progression builds comprehensive analytical strength. Case study analysis, one of the most effective mental exercises. Analyzing real-world cases systematically. The 1-hour case analysis protocol. Minutes 0 to 10. Information gathering. Read the case thoroughly. Don't jump to conclusions. Just absorb information. Note what's known, what's assumed, what's missing. Minutes 10 to 20. Problem definition. What exactly is the problem? Often the presented problem isn't the real problem. Define it precisely without assuming the framing given. Minutes 20 to 30. Framework building. What frameworks apply? What factors matter? How do they interact? Create a mental model of the situation. Minutes 30 to 40. Solution generation. Generate multiple possible solutions. Don't evaluate yet. Just create options. Aim for at least 5 distinct approaches. Minutes 40 to 50. Evaluation. Analyze each solution's likely outcomes, costs, risks, and benefits. Compare trade-offs systematically. Minutes 50 to 60. Recommendation. Choose the best solution and articulate why. What makes it superior to alternatives? What are its limitations? Sources for cases. Business case studies, Harvard Business Review, case study databases. Historical decisions, political, military, economic, ethical dilemmas, philosophy databases. Personal scenarios, your own past decisions. Thought experiments, structured thought experiments build specific analytical capacities. Counterfactual thinking. What if X had been different? How would outcomes have changed? Example, analyze a successful company. Identify 3 key decisions. For each, construct what would have happened if they decided differently. This builds understanding of causation and contingency. Second-order thinking. What happens after what happens? Example, a policy is proposed to address problem X. Analyze, how does it address X? What second-order effects does it create? What third-order effects follow? This builds foresight and systems thinking. Constraint analysis. What if resource Y were removed? How would the system adapt? Example, analyze your own life. What if you had half your current time, half your current money, twice your current responsibilities? This builds resourcefulness and priority clarity. Perspective shifting. How does this look from position Z? Example, take any contentious issue. Argue it from 3 completely different ideological positions. This builds empathy and reveals hidden assumptions. Debate practice structured debate. With yourself or others, builds argument construction and evaluation. Solo debate protocol. 30 minutes 0 to 10. Build the strongest possible argument for position A. Use evidence, logic, and address obvious counterarguments. Minutes 10 to 20. Build the strongest possible argument for position B, opposing A. Genuinely try to win this side, not just create a weak opponent. Minutes 20 to 30. Adjudicate. Which argument is stronger? Why? What would shift the balance? This forces intellectual honesty. You can't build a weak counterargument because you'll notice it when adjudicating. You must genuinely try to win both sides. Logical puzzles and problems, while less directly applicable in case studies, abstract logical problems build pure reasoning capacity. Monday, syllogistic reasoning problems. If A then B, if B then C, therefore. Tuesday, probability and statistics problems. Understanding base rates, conditional probability, expected value. Wednesday, pattern recognition problems. Identifying underlying structures. Thursday, constraint satisfaction problems, resource. Allocation, scheduling, optimization. Friday, philosophical problems. Classic thought experiment from ethics, metaphysics, epistemology. These build component skills that transfer to real-world analysis. The Socratic dialogue practice, the Socratic method on yourself. Choose a belief you hold confidently. Then interview yourself. Q. What exactly do you believe? A. Force precision. Q. Why do you believe that? A. Identify reasons. Q. What evidence supports those reasons? A. Require specifics. Q. What would change your mind? A. Test falsifiability. Q. What's the strongest argument against your position? A. Force fair opposition. Q. Can you address that argument? A. Require honest response. This self-interrogation reveals whether your confidence rests on solid foundation or empty assertion. Real-world problem solving, the ultimate mental training. Analyze your own actual decisions and problems. Weekly problem analysis. Select one real problem you're facing: career decision, relationship issue, financial choice, health behavior, analytical sequence. Problem definition. What exactly is the problem? Not symptoms. Root cause. Constraint identification. What limits your options? Time, money, information, capabilities, circumstances. Stakeholder analysis. Who's affected? What do they want? What power do they have? Option generation. What could you do? Aim for 10 options, even if some seem impractical initially. Criteria establishment. What makes a solution good? Define success metrics explicitly. Systematic evaluation. Score each option against each criterion. Use a simple matrix. Scenario planning. For top 3 options, imagine best case, worst case, and likely case outcomes. Decision. Choose and articulate reasoning. This systematic approach to real problems builds practical analytical strength. Tracking progress. Unlike physical training, analytical progress is hard to measure. Create metrics. Complexity capacity. Can you hold more variables in mind simultaneously? Track how many factors you can analyze in interconnected ways. Speed. How quickly can you move from problem to sound analysis? Time yourself on similar problems periodically. Depth. How many levels deep do your analyses go? Track whether you're reaching third-order and fourth-order effects. Accuracy. Review past analyses and decisions. How often were your predictions and reasoning correct? Learn from errors. Confidence calibration. When you say you're 70% confident, are you right 70% of the time? Track whether your confidence matches accuracy. Why this is hard deliberate analytical practice is uncomfortable. It's effortful. Unlike passive learning, active analysis requires sustained concentration. IT reveals limitations. You'll encounter problems you can't solve, exposing the boundaries of your capability that it's solitary. Analytical training lacks the social reinforcement of group activities. Results are delayed. You won't feel smarter immediately. Improvement accumulates slowly that it's optional. Unlike job requirements, nobody forces you to train analytically. These obstacles are why most people never develop strong analytical capacity despite having the raw intelligence. They avoid the discomfort rather than pushing through it. The progression after consistent practice. Weeks 1 to 2. Frustration. Problems feel harder than expected, revealing overconfidence in your analytical ability. Weeks 3 to 4. Adjustment. You develop better problem-solving processes, learning to break complex problems into manageable components. Weeks 5 to 8. Capability expansion. Problems that initially seemed impossible now feel challenging but doable. Weeks 9 to 12. Integration. Analytical thinking becomes more automatic, requiring less conscious effort. Month 4 plus. Mastery development. You begin recognizing patterns across problems, building transferable frameworks. The daily commitment 1 hour daily of deliberate analytical practice. Monday, case study analysis, business, historical, or ethical. Tuesday, thought experiment, counterfactual, second order, or constraint analysis. Wednesday, debate practice, formal argument construction for opposing positions. Thursday, logical puzzles, abstract reasoning problems. Friday, real-world problem, analyze an actual decision you're facing. Weekend, review and reflection, examine the week's analyses, identify patterns, track progress. This variety ensures comprehensive development while preventing boredom. The transformation after 3 months of daily analytical practice. Enhanced problem solving. Complex problems feel less overwhelming because you've trained on hundreds of similar complexity challenges. Faster analysis. What once took hours now takes minutes because pattern recognition improves with practice. Greater confidence. Not false confidence from ignorance, but earned confidence from demonstrated capability. Better decisions. Your real-world choices improve because you've practiced analysis systematically. Intellectual satisfaction. Solving complex problems becomes genuinely enjoyable rather than frustrating. This transformation doesn't require exceptional intelligence. It requires consistent practice. The person with average intelligence who trains daily will outperform the brilliant person who thinks occasionally. Start today. Choose one analytical exercise from this chapter. Spend 1 hour engaging with it fully. Not passively reading, actively solving, constructing, analyzing. Tomorrow, choose another exercise. Repeat daily. Your mind will strengthen invisibly. You won't notice daily progress. But 3 months from now, you'll encounter a complex problem and think, this is challenging but manageable, while remembering when similar problems felt impossible. That's the compound effect of deliberate analytical practice. 1 hour daily. Building cognitive strength through systematic mental resistance training. Chapter 7. Reflect on your reasoning process regularly. Most people never examine how they think, only what they think. They hold opinions, make decisions, and form beliefs without ever analyzing the process that generated them. This is like driving without ever checking the engine. The machine operates, but you have no idea if it's functioning well or breaking down gradually. Metacognition. Thinking about thinking is the highest level of intellectual development. It's the difference between having thoughts and understanding how thoughts form, between making decisions and recognizing the process that produces decisions, between believing things and knowing why you believe them. Without metacognitive practice, you remain trapped in automatic thinking patterns. With it, you gain the ability to observe, evaluate, and improve your own cognitive processes. This is the ultimate form of intellectual autonomy. What reflection reveals. When you examine your reasoning process systematically, you discover patterns you repeat. You use the same approach for different problems, even when different approaches would work better. Reflection reveals these patterns, blind spots you have, certain types of information you consistently ignore, certain questions you never ask, certain perspectives you don't consider, biases that dominate. While everyone has biases, individual profiles differ. Reflection shows which biases affect you most strongly. Emotions that interfere, how anger, fear, excitement, or insecurity distort your reasoning without your awareness. Quality of your process, whether your conclusions follow logically from evidence or if you're rationalizing predetermined positions. None of this is visible during thinking itself. It only becomes clear through systematic reflection afterward. The daily reflection protocol. Evening reflection, 30 minutes. First 10 minutes, decision review. Identify 3 decisions made today. They don't need to be major. Any choice, judgment, or conclusion counts. For each decision, what was decided? What process led to that decision? What information was considered? What was ignored? How quickly was a decision made? Was it intuitive or analytical? Second 10 minutes, process analysis. For one decision, analyze the reasoning process deeply. Did you seek contradictory information or just confirmatory? Did you consider alternatives seriously or superficially? Did emotion influence the decision? How? Which cognitive biases likely operated? If you made this decision again with more time, would you decide differently? Final 10 minutes, pattern identification. Look across multiple days of reflection. What reasoning patterns recur? Which types of decisions do you handle well? Which poorly? What time of day produces your best thinking? What conditions stress, fatigue, emotion degrade your reasoning most? The thought journal. Keep a dedicated journal for metacognitive reflection. Structure it consistently. Date. Decisions made today. Decision. Deep analysis. Choose one. Decision. What was decided? Context. Circumstances, stakes, time pressure. Process. How I reached this conclusion. Evidence considered. What information influenced me? Evidence ignored. What I didn't consider, be honest. Biases detected. Which biases likely operated. Emotions role. How feelings influence thinking. Alternative approaches. How else could I have approached this? Quality assessment. Was this good reasoning? Why or why not? Pattern noted. Any recurring theme observed across recent entries. This written record creates an external representation of your internal process, making it observable and analyzable. Weekly meta-analysis. Once weekly, review the past 7 days of reflection. Pattern analysis, 20 minutes. Read through the week's entries. Look for which cognitive biases appeared most frequently. Which types of decisions consistently cause difficulty? When did your reasoning quality decline? Time of day, circumstances? What improved your thinking? Adequate sleep? Quiet environment? Discussion with others? Hypothesis formation, 10 minutes. Based on patterns observed, form testable hypotheses. I make worse decisions after 8 p.m. when fatigued. I'm overconfident about technical decisions, but appropriately cautious about interpersonal ones. Confirmation bias operates most strongly on politically charged topics. Experimental design, 10 minutes. How can you test these hypotheses? What will you try differently this week? This week, defer evening decisions until morning. For technical decisions, deliberately seek counterarguments before concluding. On political topics, spend equal time with opposing viewpoints. This turns reflection into systematic self-improvement. Analyzing past decisions. Monthly, conduct deep analysis of a past significant decision. Choose a decision from 3 to 12 months ago with known outcomes. The analysis. Part 1, reconstruction, 15 minutes. Recall your thinking process as accurately as possible. What did you believe then? What information did you have? What did you expect to happen? Part 2, evaluation, 15 minutes. Assess the reasoning process, not just the outcome. Was your information gathering thorough? Were your assumptions explicit and examined? Did you consider alternatives fairly? Were your predictions well calibrated? Did you account for uncertainty appropriately? Part 3, learning, 15 minutes. What does this reveal about your thinking? What did you do well? What systematic errors occurred? What would you do differently knowing only what you knew then, not using hindsight? How can you apply these lessons to future decisions? This monthly practice builds long-term calibration between your reasoning process and actual outcomes. Cognitive autopsy: when you make a significant error in judgment, conduct a cognitive autopsy. The autopsy protocol: 45-minute stage 1. Outcome documentation: 5 minutes. What happened? What did you expect? What actually occurred? Be factual, not defensive. Stage 2. Process reconstruction: 15 minutes. Map your reasoning step by step from initial problem to final conclusion. Where did you go wrong? Was it information gathering, incomplete data, wrong sources? Assumption formation: unstated beliefs, untested premises. Logical connection: invalid inference, correlation versus causation. Bias operation: which specific bias distorted reasoning? Emotional override: fear, greed, anger influencing conclusion. Stage 3. Counterfactual analysis: 15 minutes. If you could redo this decision with the same information you had then, what questions should you have asked? What sources should you have consulted? What alternatives should you have considered? What safeguards could have prevented this error? Stage 4. Systematic correction: 10 minutes. What systematic change prevents this error type in the future? Not try harder, but actual process modification. This transforms errors from emotional failures into learning opportunities. The reasoning rubric: develop a personal rubric for evaluating reasoning quality. Information quality: 1 to 5 scale. 1. Opinion-based, no evidence. 2. Anecdotal evidence only. 3. Some reliable sources, but incomplete. 4. Multiple quality sources, fairly comprehensive. 5. Systematic evidence from primary sources. Logical validity: 1 to 5 scale. 1. Conclusions don't follow from premises. 2. Major logical gaps. 3. Generally logical with some leaps. 4. Sound logic with minor issues. 5. Rigorous logical structure throughout. Bias management: 1 to 5 scale. 1. Completely unaware of biases operating. 2. Aware but didn't compensate. 3. Partial compensation for obvious biases. 4. Systematic bias checking. 5. Comprehensive bias awareness and compensation. Alternative consideration: 1 to 5 scale. 1. No alternatives considered. 2. Token alternatives, not serious. 3. Several alternatives examined briefly. 4. Thorough analysis of key alternatives. 5. Comprehensive alternative analysis. Uncertainty calibration: 1 to 5 scale. 1. False certainty or complete uncertainty. 2. Poorly calibrated confidence. 3. Roughly appropriate confidence levels. 4. Well calibrated with explicit uncertainties. 5. Precise probability assessments matching outcomes. Apply this rubric to significant decisions weekly. Track scores over time to measure improvement. Group reflection: while most reflection is solitary, periodic group reflection provides external perspective. Monthly thinking partners: 60 minutes. Find someone committed to intellectual development. Exchange recent decisions and reasoning processes. Each person presents 15 minutes. Describe a recent decision and the reasoning process used. Questions: 15 minutes. The partner asks probing questions about process, not just outcome. Why did you weight that factor heavily? What evidence did you seek but not find? What alternative did you dismiss and why? Feedback: 10 minutes. Partner identifies blind spots, biases, or process weaknesses you didn't notice. Reversal: 20 minutes. Switch roles and repeat. External perspective reveals what self-reflection misses. Partners catch patterns you're too close to see. Reflection resistance: most people avoid metacognitive reflection because it reveals incompetence. Examining your reasoning exposes how often you think poorly. This threatens self-image as effortful. Reflection requires energy after already making decisions. Easier to move to the next thing. IT lacks immediate reward. Unlike action, reflection doesn't create visible progress. Benefits are delayed. IT challenges ego. Admitting reasoning errors feels like personal failure rather than normal human fallibility. IT creates cognitive dissonance. Seeing gaps between how you think and how you actually think creates uncomfortable tension. These are obstacles, not excuses. Intellectual maturity means accepting discomfort as the price of improvement. What changes over time after 3 months of systematic reflection? Week 1 to 2, shock. Discovering how poorly you often reason despite feeling confident. Week 3 to 4, recognition. Starting to catch reasoning errors in real time, not just retrospectively. Week 5 to 8, adjustment. Implementing process improvements based on pattern identification. Week 9 to 12, integration. Better reasoning becoming more automatic, requiring less conscious. Correction. The transformation isn't just better decisions, it's better decision-making process. You develop process consciousness, awareness of your reasoning approach while engaging in it, not just afterward. Error detection. Catching logical fallacies, unsupported assumptions, and bias operations as they occur. Adaptive thinking. Adjusting your approach based on problem type, circumstances, and your current cognitive state. Intellectual humility. Realistic assessment of what you know, don't know, and can't know. Learning orientation. Viewing reasoning errors as information rather than failure. The reflection library build a personal collection of reasoning insights. Section 1. Patterns identified. Recurring themes in your thinking, both strengths and weaknesses. Section 2. Biases to watch. The specific cognitive biases that affect you most strongly, with examples from your own experience. Section 3. Optimal conditions. When you think best, time of day, environment, preparation, emotional state. Section 4. Warning signs. Indicators that your reasoning quality is declining, fatigue, time pressure, emotional arousal. Section 5. Effective strategies. Techniques that improve your thinking. Decision delays, external input, systematic frameworks. Section 6. Case studies. Detailed analyses of significant decisions, both good and poor, with lessons extracted. This library becomes your personal manual for thinking well, customized to your specific cognitive patterns. Daily practice integration to complete daily reflection practice. 30 to 40 minutes immediately after significant decisions, 5 minutes. Quick note, what was decided? What process was used? This captures information while fresh. Evening reflection, 25 minutes. Review the day's decisions systematically using the protocol outlined earlier. Weekly synthesis, 40 minutes. Pattern analysis, hypothesis formation, experimental design for the coming week. Monthly deep dive, 60 minutes. Analysis of one past major decision using the comprehensive protocol. This creates continuous feedback loops between action and analysis, decision and learning. The meta level eventually. Reflect on your reflection practice itself. Quarterly meta-reflection. Is reflection improving decision quality? How do you know? Which reflection practices provide most value? Are you applying insights or just collecting them? Has metacognition become easier or is it still effortful? What's missing from your reflection practice? This meta-metacognition ensures your development continues rather than plateaus. The transformation regular metacognitive reflection creates profound changes, from unconscious to conscious thinking. You stop operating on autopilot and start thinking deliberately. From reactive to reflective, you create space between stimulus and response to examine your reasoning. From defensive to curious, errors become interesting rather than threatening. From fixed to growth, you see thinking as a skill you're developing, not a fixed capability you possess or lack. From isolated to systematic, you connect individual decisions to patterns, building comprehensive self-understanding. Most importantly, you develop the rarest form of knowledge, accurate self-knowledge. Not the flattering self-image most people maintain, but honest understanding of how you actually think, including all the ways you systematically err. This knowledge is power. You can't improve what you don't understand, and you can't understand your thinking without examining it systematically. Start tonight. Review one decision made today. Analyze the process that produced it. Write it down. Do the same tomorrow and the next day. After 30 days, you'll have 30 detailed examinations of your reasoning process. Patterns will emerge. You'll see yourself thinking more clearly than introspection alone ever reveals. That clarity becomes a foundation for continuous intellectual development. Not hoping to think better, not trying harder, Actually improving through systematic understanding of how your mind works. Point 1 reflection daily. Building self-knowledge that transforms thinking from unconscious habit to conscious skill. Chapter 8. Confront one weak argument you've been defending everyone as intellectual baggage. Arguments they defend despite insufficient evidence. Positions they maintain despite contrary information. Beliefs they protect despite weak reasoning. These are the ideas you've invested in. The positions tied to your identity. The beliefs that, if questioned, threaten your self-concept. Most people carry these weak arguments their entire lives. They avoid examination because questioning feels dangerous. They surround themselves with confirmatory information. They dismiss challenges without serious consideration. They mistake stubbornness for integrity. But intellectual growth requires confronting your weakest arguments, not just polishing your strongest ones. The beliefs you're most reluctant to question are precisely the ones most likely to be flawed. Discomfort during examination is a signal. Something important is happening. Identifying weak arguments you defend. Most people claim they have no weak arguments, just strong positions that others don't understand. This itself is a weak argument. Everyone holds some beliefs based on insufficient reasoning. Warning signs of weak arguments. Defensive reactions. If someone questioning your position triggers anger, that's a signal. Sound arguments welcome scrutiny. Lack of specificity. You defend the position generally but can't articulate precise reasoning. It's just obvious or everyone knows replaces actual argumentation. Emotional investment. The belief is tied to identity, tribe, or self-image. Questioning it feels like questioning yourself. Selective evidence. You can cite evidence supporting your position but can't articulate the strongest counterarguments. Vintage beliefs. You've held this position for years without serious re-examination despite new information becoming available. Social reinforcement. Everyone in your social circle agrees, creating echo chamber effects rather than genuine testing. Immune to updates. No evidence could change your mind because you've made the belief. Unfalsifiable. Identify one belief exhibiting multiple warning signs. That's your weak argument. The Confrontation Protocol Hour 1. Honest assessment. 60 minutes total part 1. Explicit statement, 10 minutes. Write your position precisely. No hedging, no vagueness. State exactly what you believe and what you're claiming is true. Part 2. Evidence inventory, 15 minutes. List all evidence supporting your position. Be specific. No study show without citing which studies. No, everyone knows without data. Part 3. Critical examination, 15 minutes. For each piece of evidence. Is this primary evidence or interpretation? Is this correlation or causation? Is this representative or cherry-picked? What's the sample size and methodology? Who conducted this research and what incentives did they have? Part 4. Counter-evidence search, 15 minutes. Actively seek evidence against your position, not straw man versions. The strongest possible counterarguments and contradictory evidence. If you can't find any, you're not searching honestly. Part 5. Honest evaluation, 5 minutes. Given both evidence sets examined fairly, how strong is your argument actually? Rate it honestly. Strong, moderate, weak, or unsupported. This process is uncomfortable because it reveals what you've been avoiding. Many defended positions rest on weak foundations. Common weak arguments. While everyone's intellectual baggage differs, common categories exist. Political positions. Beliefs about policy effectiveness, economic systems, or governance that align perfectly with political identity. If your policy views match your tribe exactly, you're likely defending weak arguments. Health beliefs. Positions about diet, exercise, or medical interventions based on anecdote, trend, or ideology rather than systematic evidence. Self-assessments. Beliefs about your own capabilities, motivations, or characteristics that serve ego protection. I'm bad at math, or I'm naturally disorganized. Often defend against effort rather than describe reality. Relationship patterns. Explanations for recurring relationship problems that always blame others or circumstances, never examining your contributions. Career justifications. Arguments for why you remain in unsatisfying situations, emphasizing external barriers while minimizing agency. Historical interpretations. Beliefs about past events that align perfectly with current identity or ideology, often simplified into good versus evil narratives. Philosophical positions. Abstract beliefs adopted wholesale from a system or teacher without critical examination of each component. Which category contains your weakest offended argument? The steel man approach most people, when forced to consider opposing views, create weak versions easily dismissed. This is intellectual cowardice. Steel man instead. Construct the strongest possible version of the opposing argument. Make it so strong that someone holding that position would say, "Yes, that's exactly my reasoning." For your weak argument, build a steel man opposition. 1. Research the best opposing arguments. Find the smartest proponents of contrary positions. Read their actual arguments, not summaries by critics. Point 2. Understand their reasoning. Why do intelligent, honest people reach opposite conclusions? What evidence do they find compelling? What framework do they use? 3. Construct their strongest case. Build their argument as rigorously as you build your own. Include their best evidence, their strongest logic, their most compelling points. Point 4. Compare honestly. Place your argument and the steel man opposition side by side. Which is actually stronger? Be brutally honest. This reveals whether your position survives genuine challenge or only weak opposition. The belief audit for the weak argument you've identified. Conduct a complete audit. Origin. Where did this belief come from? Parents? Culture? Single experience? Social group? Authority figure? Careful analysis? Evolution. Has it changed over time or remained static despite new information? Testing. Have you actively tried to disprove it? Or only sought confirmation? Stakes. What would it cost you to be wrong? Pride? Identity? Social belonging? Money? This reveals motivations for defending it. Alternatives. What competing explanations exist? Have you seriously considered them? Evidence quality. If you discovered your evidence was flawed, would you change position? Or find new evidence to support predetermined conclusion? Falsifiability. What would prove this belief wrong? If you can't specify, it's not a testable belief. It's an unfalsifiable commitment. This audit exposes the difference between beliefs based on reasoning and beliefs based on identity protection. Intellectual courage confronting weak arguments requires courage because several fears arise. Fear of being wrong. If this belief is flawed, you've been wrong for years. This feels humiliating rather than enlightening. Fear of identity loss. Many beliefs are identity markers. I'm the kind of person who believes X. Questioning X questions your identity. Fear of social consequences. Your community may share this belief. Questioning it risks isolation or conflict. Fear of uncertainty. Weak arguments provide false certainty. Abandoning them means tolerating "I don't know." Fear of complexity. Weak arguments are often simple. Better arguments acknowledge nuance and complexity, which is less emotionally satisfying. These fears are real, but they're not reasons to maintain false beliefs. Intellectual maturity means accepting these costs as the price of thinking honestly. What happens when you change your mind if confrontation reveals your argument truly is weak? What then? Option 1. Revise the belief. Adjust your position to align with better evidence. This isn't failure. It's intellectual growth. Option 2. Suspend judgment. If evidence is insufficient in either direction, adopt "I don't know" rather than forcing premature certainty. Option 3. Maintain but weaken. Perhaps the core intuition has merit, but your specific argument doesn't. Hold the position more tentatively while seeking better reasoning. Option 4. Reverse position. Sometimes examination reveals you were simply wrong. The courage to completely reverse position is rare and admirable. Whatever you choose, do it consciously based on evidence, not defensively protect ego. The monthly challenge once monthly. Identify one weak argument and confront it systematically. Month 1. Political position you've never seriously questioned. Month 2. Self-assessment that limits you. Month 3. Relationship pattern you've always blamed on others. Month 4. Health belief you've never tested. Month 5. Career justification you repeated for years. Month 6. Historical interpretation that aligns too perfectly with ideology. Month 7. Philosophical position adopted without examination. Month 8. Financial belief influencing major decisions. Month 9. Parenting approach you defend despite mixed results. Month 10, scientific position you've accepted without understanding. Month 11, psychological belief about how people work. Month 12, moral position you've never seriously tested against alternatives. After 12 months, you examine 12 previously unquestioned beliefs. Some may survive examination stronger. Others will be revised or abandoned. All will be held more consciously. Why this transforms thinking regularly, confronting weak arguments, creates several effects. Reduced offensiveness. You stop protecting beliefs reflexively because you're accustomed to questioning them. Improved argument quality. Knowing your beliefs face regular scrutiny motivates better reasoning up front. Intellectual humility. Discovering weak arguments you defended confidently reveals how often confidence exceeds justification. Better updating. You become comfortable changing positions when evidence demands it rather than clinging to outdated beliefs. Stronger remaining positions. Beliefs that survive scrutiny can be held with genuine confidence rather than defensive certainty. The transformation after 1 year of monthly weak argument confrontation. You'll hold fewer positions, but hold them better. You'll have changed your mind on multiple significant issues. You'll be comfortable saying, "I don't know," or "I was wrong." You'll welcome rather than fear challenges to your thinking. Most importantly, you'll have broken the pattern of defending beliefs out of ego rather than evidence. You'll have become someone who thinks honestly rather than someone who protects positions. This is rare. Most people spend entire lives defending intellectual baggage, never pausing to examine whether their defended beliefs deserve defending. You can be different. Start this month. Identify one weak argument you've been defending. One position you hold more from identity than evidence. One belief you're reluctant to question. Then confront it honestly, rigorously, courageously. Build the strongest counterargument possible. Examine your evidence critically. Be willing to discover you're wrong. That willingness to question what you defended, to examine what you protected, to change what you maintained, is a foundation of intellectual integrity. Point: 1 weak argument confronted monthly. 12 beliefs examined annually. A lifetime of thinking honestly rather than defensively. Start now. What's the one argument you're most reluctant to question? That's where to begin. Chapter 9. Document your thought process and track improvements. Thoughts without documentation are like dreams, vivid while occurring, vague immediately after, forgotten completely within days. You think complex thoughts, reach important conclusions, and notice valuable patterns. Then they disappear, leaving no trace except the vague sense that you once understood something you can no longer articulate. This is intellectual waste. Documentation transforms ephemeral thinking into durable knowledge. It makes invisible reasoning visible. It allows comparison across time, revealing patterns you'd never notice within individual thoughts. It creates accountability. You can't deceive yourself when your past thinking stares back from written pages. Most people resist documentation because writing is effortful. Thinking feels sufficient. But thinking without documentation is like exercise without tracking. You expend energy without measuring whether you're progressing. Why documentation transforms thinking? Writing clarifies thought. Ideas that seem coherent mentally often reveal gaps when articulated. Writing exposes these gaps. Documentation creates memory. You can review past thinking, seeing exactly what you concluded and why. This prevents repeating previous errors or forgotten insights. Tracking reveals patterns. One decision looks random. 50 documented decisions reveal systematic patterns in your reasoning. Progress becomes visible. Intellectual development feels abstract. Documentation makes it concrete. Comparing thinking quality across months proves growth. Accountability emerges. Past documentation holds present thinking accountable. You can't claim you always believe this when earlier entries show otherwise. Insights compound. Ideas separated by time can connect when documented in the same space. Patterns emerge that individual thoughts miss. The thinking journal structure. Maintain one dedicated journal for critical thinking development. Structure consistently. Daily entry format. Date. Context. Brief description of day's circumstances. Decisions made. Major decision. Moderate decision. Minor but interesting decision. Deep analysis. Choose one. Complete analysis of one decision. using framework from Chapter 2, Bias Detected, which cognitive bias operated today. Specific example, argument constructed, core position examined today, and reasoning built. Thought quality self-assessment. Mental clarity, 1 to 5. Logical rigor, 1 to 5. Bias awareness, 1 to 5. Evidence seeking, 1 to 5. Pattern noted. Any recurring theme across recent entries. Tomorrow's focus, 1 specific thinking improvement to attempt. This structure creates comprehensive documentation while remaining manageable. Tracking systems. Beyond daily journaling, implement specific tracking systems. Decision log. Create a simple spreadsheet. Date, decision, confidence, level, predicted outcome, actual outcome analysis. This tracks prediction accuracy and confidence calibration over time. Bias frequency tracker. Weekly. Tally which cognitive biases you detected. Confirmation bias. Availability heuristic. Anchoring. Sunk cost fallacy, etc. This reveals your cognitive bias profile, which biases affect you most. Argument quality matrix. For significant arguments constructed, rate on multiple dimensions. Evidence quality, 1 to 5. Logical validity, 1 to 5. Counterargument consideration, 1 to 5. Bias management, 1 to 5. Clarity, 1 to 5. Track these scores monthly to measure argumentative improvement. Reading and learning log. Document each cognitive bias, logical fallacy, or thinking framework learned. Date, concept definition, personal example applications. This creates a personalized reference library. Weekly review protocol. Every 7 days, conduct a comprehensive review. Sunday review, 45 minutes. Minutes 0 to 15, pattern identification. Read through the week's daily entries. Note recurring themes. Which decisions were hardest? Why? Which biases appeared multiple times? Did thinking quality vary by time of day, circumstance, or emotional state? What improved compared to last week? What degraded? Minutes 15 to 30, metric analysis. Review all track metrics. Decision log. How accurate were predictions? How calibrated was confidence? Bias tracker. Which biases dominated this week? Argument quality. Are scores improving? Self-assessments. Which dimensions need focus? Minutes 30 to 40. Hypothesis formation. Based on patterns observed, form testable hypotheses about your thinking. I make better decisions in morning when well-rested. Confirmation bias spikes on politically charged topics. Arguments constructed with time pressure show lower quality scores. Minutes 40 to 45. Next week planning. What will you try differently based on this week's insights? Schedule important decisions for optimal times. Implement specific bias countermeasures. Apply new thinking frameworks learned. Monthly deep dive. Once monthly. Conduct extensive analysis. Month-end analysis, 90 minutes. Part 1. Comprehensive pattern review, 30 minutes. Read all daily entries from the month. Create a synthesis document noting most common decision types, dominant cognitive biases, recurring reasoning errors, emerging improvements, persistent weaknesses. Part 2. Metric visualization, 20 minutes. Graph your track metrics. Plot thought quality self-assessments over time. Chart argument quality scores. Visualize bias frequency changes. Graph confidence calibration accuracy. Seeing trends visually reveals what numerical data alone misses. Part 3. Comparison to previous months, 20 minutes. Compare this month's patterns to previous months. What improved? What regressed? What new patterns emerged? What old patterns disappeared? Part 4. Systematic adjustment, 20 minutes. Based on comprehensive analysis, what systematic changes will you implement? New thinking frameworks to apply. Decision protocols to follow. Bias countermeasures to employ. Learning priorities for next month. This monthly cycle ensures continuous improvement rather than static practice. The comparison effect. One of documentation's most powerful effects. Comparing past and present thinking. Quarterly comparison exercise. Take a significant decision or argument from 3 months ago. Read your original analysis. Then, without looking at your original conclusion, analyze the same decision now. Compare. Did your analysis improve? How specifically? Do you reach the same conclusion or different? What do you notice now that you missed then? What did you overweight then that matters less now? Has your bias awareness improved? Is your reasoning more rigorous? This direct comparison makes growth tangible. You see exactly how your thinking has developed in ways that feel invisible day to day. Why people resist documentation. Several obstacles prevent systematic documentation. Effort. Writing requires more energy than thinking alone. It's easier to not document. Exposure. Documentation creates evidence of poor thinking. Easier to let weak reasoning fade from memory. Discipline. Consistent documentation requires building and maintaining habit. Most people start strong, but fade. Perfectionism. People wait for the perfect system rather than starting with something simple. Privacy concerns. Documenting honest thinking feels vulnerable. What if someone reads it? Perceived inefficiency. Documentation feels like overhead rather than value creation. These are obstacles, not insurmountable barriers. The value of documentation vastly exceeds the effort required. Digital versus analog. Analog notebook advantages. No distraction from devices. Kinesthetic memory reinforcement from writing. Can't be lost to technical failure. Feels more private. Digital app/document advantages. Searchable for pattern identification. Easier to create graphs and track metrics. Can include links to sources. Facilitates long-term storage. Choose based on personal preference. The system you'll actually use consistently is the right system. The transformation timeline. Week 1 to 2. Documentation feels effortful and unclear what value it provides. Week 3 to 4. First patterns become visible in weekly reviews. Month 2. First meaningful comparison between early and recent entries shows tangible improvement. Month 3. Documentation becomes habitual, requiring less conscious effort. Month 6. Comprehensive pattern library reveals your cognitive profile, strengths, weaknesses, optimal conditions. Month 12. Year-over-year comparison shows dramatic thinking development in visible day-to-day. What documentation reveals? After consistent documentation, you'll discover your cognitive rhythms, when you think best, when reasoning degrades, how circumstances affect thinking quality. Your bias profile, which biases dominate, which rarely appear, which intensify under stress. Your argument patterns, recurring logical structures, common reasoning errors, areas of strength and weakness. Your decision patterns, which decision types you handle well, which consistently cause difficulty. Your growth trajectory, concrete evidence of intellectual development over time. Your blind spots, what you consistently miss, ignore, or fail to consider. This self-knowledge is invaluable. You can't improve what you don't understand. Documentation creates understanding. The daily commitment. Minimum viable documentation practice. Daily, 15 minutes. Note 3 decisions made. Analyze 1 deeply using standard framework. Record 1 bias detected. Self-assess thinking quality. Weekly, 45 minutes. Review all daily entries. Identify patterns. Form hypotheses. Plan next week. Monthly, 90 minutes. Comprehensive pattern analysis. Metric visualization. Comparison to previous months. Systematic adjustments. This structure balances comprehensiveness with sustainability. The compound effect. Documentation creates compound returns. Month 1. Build baseline understanding of current thinking patterns. Month 3. First significant improvements visible in comparisons. Month 6. Well-developed pattern library and bias awareness. Month 12. Dramatic year-over-year improvement provable through documentation. Year 2+. Increasingly refined understanding of your cognitive processes. Unlike many practices where returns diminish, documentation's value increases over time as the historical record grows. Start today. Buy a notebook or create a digital document. Make the first entry. Today's date. 3 decisions made today. Analysis of one decision. 1 bias detected. Self-assessment scores. 1 pattern noticed. Tomorrow, repeat. The day after, repeat again. Within weeks, you'll have enough documentation to see patterns. Within months, you'll have concrete evidence of improvement. Within a year, you'll possess comprehensive understanding of how your mind works, its strengths, weaknesses, patterns, and evolution. That understanding, built through systematic documentation and tracking, transforms thinking from invisible process to visible skill you can continuously refine. 1 entry daily. Building the most valuable database you'll ever create. The complete record of how you think and how you're improving. Chapter 10. Practice until rigorous thinking becomes automatic. Everything you've learned in this book requires conscious effort initially. Questioning assumptions takes deliberate attention. Constructing sound arguments demands focused concentration. Recognizing biases requires active monitoring. Documenting thought processes needs discipline. This conscious effort is necessary and temporary. The goal isn't permanent vigilance. The goal is automaticity. You practice until rigorous thinking becomes your default mode, operating unconsciously, requiring no more effort than breathing. This is how all complex skills develop. Driving once required total concentration. Now you navigate traffic while planning dinner. Public speaking once triggered crippling anxiety. Now you present without conscious thought. The same transformation occurs with thinking. Conscious practice becomes unconscious competence. The stages of skill development. Understanding the progression helps maintain motivation through difficult phases. Stage 1, unconscious incompetence, weeks 1 to 2. You don't know what you don't know. You think poorly while believing you think clearly. The first few chapters of this book moved you out of this stage by revealing cognitive limitations. Stage 2, conscious incompetence, weeks 3 to 8. You recognize poor thinking but can't consistently prevent it. This stage is frustrating. You see errors in retrospect but can't catch them real time. Most people quit here because increased awareness without increased performance feels like regression. Stage 3, conscious competence, weeks 9 to 20. You think rigorously, but it requires deliberate effort. Every good decision demands concentration. Every bias recognition needs active monitoring. This stage works, but isn't yet sustainable long-term because the effort level is high. Stage 4, unconscious competence, week 21 plus. Rigorous thinking operates automatically. You question assumptions without deciding to question. You recognize biases without monitoring for them. You construct sound arguments without conscious framework application. This is the goal. Thinking well becomes who you are, not what you do. The 10,000-hour myth. Popular understanding claims mastery requires 10,000 hours. This misunderstands the research. Deliberate practice quality matters more than duration. 1 focused hour beats 10 distracted hours. For critical thinking development. Poor practice. Passively reading about biases, nodding along, feeling smart, never applying. Good practice. Active application. Catching 1 bias daily, examining 1 decision thoroughly, building 1 rigorous argument. Excellent practice. Systematic progression through increasingly difficult challenges while tracking progress and adjusting based on feedback. You don't need 10,000 hours. You need consistent, excellent practice until rigorous thinking becomes automatic. For most people, this requires 6 to 12 months of daily deliberate practice. The daily practice evolution. Your daily practice should evolve as skills develop. Months 1 to 2, foundation building. Learn 1 cognitive bias daily. Practice basic argument construction. Document every day. Focus on awareness. Simply noticing when thinking is poor. Months 3 to 4, skill integration. Catch biases in real time, not just retrospectively. Construct more complex arguments. Apply multiple frameworks to decisions. Begin developing personal thinking systems. Months 5 to 6, increasing complexity. Tackle genuinely difficult problems. Engage with sophisticated arguments opposing your positions. Develop rapid-fire bias recognition. Build comprehensive thought process documentation. Months 7 to 9 toward automaticity. Practice under pressure and time constraints. Apply frameworks without conscious effort. Recognize patterns instantly. Integrate all skills seamlessly. Months 10 to 12, unconscious competence. Rigorous thinking operates by default. Bias recognition is immediate and effortless. Sound argumentation flows naturally. Poor reasoning feels viscerally wrong. Chapter 10. Practice until rigorous thinking becomes automatic. Everything you've learned in this book requires conscious effort initially. Questioning assumptions takes deliberate attention. Constructing sound arguments demands focused concentration. Recognizing biases requires active monitoring. Documenting thought processes needs discipline. This conscious effort is necessary and temporary. The goal isn't permanent vigilance. The goal is automaticity. You practice until rigorous thinking becomes your default mode, operating unconsciously, requiring no more effort than breathing. This is how all complex skills develop. Driving once required total concentration. Now you navigate traffic while planning dinner. Public speaking once triggered crippling anxiety. Now you present without conscious thought. The same transformation occurs with thinking. Conscious practice becomes unconscious competence. The stages of skill development. Understanding the progression helps maintain motivation through difficult phases. Stage 1, unconscious incompetence, weeks 1 to 2. You don't know what you don't know. You think poorly while believing you think clearly. The first few chapters of this book move you out of this stage by revealing cognitive limitations. Stage 2, conscious incompetence, weeks 3 to 8. You recognize poor thinking but can't consistently prevent it. This stage is frustrating. You see errors in retrospect but can't catch them real time. Most people quit here because increased awareness without increased performance feels like regression. Stage 3, conscious competence, weeks 9 to 20. You think rigorously, but it requires deliberate effort. Every good decision demands concentration. Every bias recognition needs active monitoring. This stage works, but isn't yet sustainable long-term because the effort level is high. Stage 4, unconscious competence, week 21 plus. Rigorous thinking operates automatically. You question assumptions without deciding to question. You recognize biases without monitoring for them. You construct sound arguments without conscious framework application. This is a goal. Thinking well becomes who you are, not what you do. The 10,000-hour myth. Popular understanding claims mastery requires 10,000 hours. This misunderstands the research. Deliberate practice quality matters more than duration. One focused hour beats 10 distracted hours. For critical thinking development, poor practice, passively reading about biases, nodding along, feeling smart, never applying. Good practice, active application, catching one bias daily, examining one decision thoroughly, building one rigorous argument. Excellent practice, systematic progression through increasingly difficult challenges while tracking progress and adjusting based on feedback. You don't need 10,000 hours. You need consistent, excellent practice until rigorous thinking becomes automatic. For most people, this requires 6 to 12 months of daily deliberate practice. The daily practice evolution. Your daily practice should evolve as skills develop. Months 1 to 2, foundation building. Learn one cognitive bias daily. Practice basic argument construction. Document every day. Focus on awareness. Simply noticing when thinking is poor. Months 3 to 4, skill integration. Catch biases in real time, not just retrospectively. Construct more complex arguments. Apply multiple frameworks to decisions. Begin developing personal thinking systems. Months 5 to 6, increasing complexity. Tackle genuinely difficult problems. Engage with sophisticated arguments opposing your positions. Develop rapid-fire bias recognition. Build comprehensive thought process documentation. Months 7 to 9, toward automaticity. Practice under pressure and time constraints. Apply frameworks without conscious effort. Recognize patterns instantly. Integrate all skills seamlessly. Months 10 to 12, unconscious competence. Rigorous thinking operates by default. Bias recognition is immediate and effortless. Sound argumentation flows naturally. Poor reasoning feels viscerally wrong. Deliberate practice principles. Effective practice follows specific principles. Principle 1. Work at the edge of capability. Too easy equals no growth. Too hard equals discouragement. The sweet spot, challenging but achievable with focused effort. Principle 2. Focus on weaknesses, not strengths. Natural tendency is practicing what you're good at because it feels better. Growth comes from improving weaknesses. Principle 3. Get immediate feedback. The faster you discover errors, the faster you correct them. Daily documentation and weekly reviews provide this feedback. Principle 4. Repeat with variation. Repeating identical exercises creates boredom without growth. Vary the content while maintaining skill focus. Principle 5. Maintain consistency over intensity. 1 hour daily for a year beats weekend marathons. Consistency builds automaticity. The habit stack. Integrate critical thinking practice into existing routines. Morning stack. Wake, question one assumption, Chapter 2. Coffee, review yesterday's thinking journal, Chapter 9. Midday stack. Lunch, analyze one decision made this morning, Chapter 3. Evening stack. Before bed, document day's thinking, Chapter 9. Lights out, mental review of biases detected, Chapter 5. Weekly stack. Sunday morning, weekly pattern review, Chapter 9. Sunday afternoon, confront one-week argument, Chapter 8. Stacking onto existing habits reduces activation energy required. Measuring automaticity, how do you know when rigorous thinking has become automatic? Look for these indicators. Indicator 1. Reduced effort. Critical thinking no longer feels exhausting. You question assumptions naturally, not through forced discipline. Indicator 2. Real-time correction. You catch reasoning errors as they occur, not just in retrospection. Mid-conversation, you notice yourself making an unsupported claim and immediately correct it. Indicator 3. Discomfort with poor reasoning. Bad logic feels viscerally wrong, like someone scratching nails on a chalkboard. You can't let weak arguments pass unchallenged. Indicator 4. Automatic pattern recognition. You immediately recognize cognitive biases operating in yourself and others without consciously checking for them. Indicator 5. Natural documentation. You reach for your journal reflexively after significant decisions, not because you should, but because you want to process the thinking. Indicator 6. Questioning becomes default. Your first response to claims is, what's the evidence? Not acceptance or rejection based on feelings. Indicator 7. Others notice. People comment on your thinking quality. They seek your perspective on complex problems. They trust your judgment. Common plateaus and how to break through plateau 1. Month 2 to 3 awareness without improvement. You see your poor reasoning, but can't prevent it. This feels like failure, but is actually progress. Awareness precedes change. Breakthrough. Increase practice frequency. If doing one exercise daily, add a second. The gap between awareness and ability closes through repetition. Plateau 2, month 4 to 5 inconsistency. Some days you think brilliantly. Other days you revert to old patterns. This variability is frustrating. Breakthrough. Identify the variables. Review your documentation. What conditions correlate with good thinking? Sleep? Stress levels? Time of day? Optimize controllable factors. Plateau 3, month 7 to 8 slow progress. Improvement becomes less noticeable. You're better than month 1, but growth feels stalled. Breakthrough. Increase difficulty. You've mastered current challenges. Add complexity. Tighter time constraints, more ambiguous problems, higher stakes decisions. Plateau 4, month 10 to 11 near automaticity frustration. You're close to unconscious competence, but not quite there. Occasional lapses into old patterns create frustration. Breakthrough. Accept imperfection. Even experts occasionally think poorly. The goal isn't perfection. It's substantially better baseline thinking with faster error recognition. The practice accountability system solo practice is powerful, but social accountability accelerates development. Option 1. Thinking partner. Find one person equally committed. Weekly exchange. Share documented decisions and reasoning. Challenge each other's arguments. Identify misbiases. Celebrate improvements. Option 2. Study group. 3 to 5 people meeting monthly. Each presents one complex decision and reasoning process. Group identifies strengths and weaknesses. Practice constructing arguments collaboratively. Discuss cognitive biases and share recognition strategies. Option 3. Mentor relationship. Seek someone whose thinking you admire. Share monthly summaries of your practice. Request feedback on documented reasoning. Learn from their approaches to complex problems. Gradually internalize their analytical frameworks. Option 4. Teaching others. Nothing solidifies learning like teaching. Start a blog documenting your thinking journey. Teach workshops on critical thinking basics. Mentor someone beginning their practice. Explaining concept to others reveals gaps in your understanding. The long-term maintenance plan after achieving unconscious competence. Maintenance prevents skill decay. Daily, 15 minutes. Brief documentation, just enough to maintain awareness and pattern tracking. Weekly, 30 minutes. Review recent decisions. Ensure standards haven't slipped. Monthly, 60 minutes. Deep dive on one complex problem. Keep skills sharp through challenge. Quarterly, 2 hours. Comprehensive review of thinking patterns. Identify any regression. Adjust practices as needed. Annually, 1 day. Full audit of thinking quality. Compare to previous year. Set development goals for the coming year. This maintenance schedule takes 2 to 3 hours monthly once automaticity is achieved. Far less than the daily hour required during skill building. Advanced practice techniques. Once basic competence is established, these advanced techniques accelerate progress toward automaticity. Technique 1. Speed drilling. Set timer for 5 minutes. How many cognitive biases can you identify in a complex article? This builds rapid pattern recognition. Technique 2. Constraint practice. Build sound arguments under severe constraints. 60-second limit. Maximum 3 premises. No access to external information. This forces efficiency and clarity. Technique 3. Domain transfer. Take thinking frameworks from one domain and apply to another. Can you use scientific reasoning frameworks on personal decisions? Economic reasoning on relationship problems? This builds flexible thinking. Technique 4. Adversarial testing. For every position you reach, immediately try to destroy it. Play your own devil's advocate aggressively. This builds robust reasoning. Technique 5. Real-world application. Apply critical thinking to actual high-stakes decisions, not just practice problems. This is where theory becomes skill. The identity shift. The ultimate indicator of automaticity. Identity transformation. You stop being someone trying to think better and become someone who thinks clearly. This isn't ego. It's accurate self-assessment based on consistent demonstration. Early stage. I'm working on my critical thinking. Middle stage. I practice rigorous thinking daily. Advanced stage. I think clearly. This identity shift is both cause and effect. Seeing yourself as a clear thinker motivates behavior consistent with that identity. Consistent behavior reinforces the identity. What life looks like with automatic rigorous thinking. After 12+ months of deliberate practice. In decisions, you naturally consider multiple options, seek disconfirming evidence, check for biases, and construct sound arguments. This happens automatically, not through forced discipline. In conversations, you detect logical fallacies immediately. You ask clarifying questions instinctively. You distinguish evidence from opinion effortlessly. In learning, you critically evaluate new information automatically. You don't passively accept or reflexively reject. You assess based on evidence and logic. In relationships, you attribute behavior more accurately, recognizing situational factors rather than jumping to character judgments. You argue more productively because you understand argumentation structure. In self-understanding, you recognize your own biases operating. You notice when emotion distorts reasoning. You catch yourself jumping to conclusions and immediately correct. In problem solving, complex problems feel manageable because you automatically break them into components, identify key factors, and construct systematic solutions. This isn't theoretical. It's how you operate daily, effortlessly, automatically. The final challenge. You've spent months building critical thinking skills through deliberate practice. Now comes the ultimate test. Can you maintain this without external structure? Remove this book. Remove the structured exercises. Remove the prescribed routines. Does rigorous thinking continue? Or do you revert to old patterns when external scaffolding disappears? True automaticity means thinking clearly becomes intrinsic, not dependent on external prompts or structures. You question assumptions because you're someone who questions assumptions, not because Chapter 2 told you to. This is the test of genuine integration, and you'll know you've passed when you realize you haven't thought about practicing critical thinking in weeks. You've just been thinking, and the thinking has been consistently rigorous. The lifetime practice. Even after achieving automaticity, the best thinkers maintain deliberate practice. Warren Buffett reads 500 pages daily, not to learn new information primarily, but to maintain thinking quality. Nobel laureates continue publishing papers, not for career advancement, but to keep analytical skills sharp. Supreme Court justices write detailed opinions, not because required, but because the practice of rigorous legal reasoning maintains cognitive excellence. Mastery isn't a destination where practice ends. It's a state maintained through ongoing engagement. The difference: practice shifts from effortful building to enjoyable maintenance. Like an athlete who still trains but now finds joy in the training itself rather than suffering through it. Your next steps. You've completed the framework. You understand how to question assumptions systematically, Chapter 1 to 2. How to focus analysis on what matters, Chapter 3. How to construct sound arguments, Chapter 4. How to recognize cognitive biases, Chapter 5. How to exercise analytical capacity, Chapter 6. How to reflect on reasoning processes, Chapter 7. How to confront weak arguments, Chapter 8. How to document and track thinking, Chapter 9. How to practice until rigorous thinking becomes automatic, Chapter 10. Now you must choose. Will you actually practice? Or will this remain theoretical knowledge, interesting but inert? The transformation from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence requires one thing above all: consistent practice over sufficient time, not occasional effort, not intense bursts followed by neglect. Consistent daily practice for months until rigorous thinking becomes who you are, not what you do. Start today. 1 hour. Pick any practice from any chapter. Do it fully, not half-heartedly. Document it. Repeat tomorrow. After 1 week, you'll have 7 hours of deliberate practice, more than most people invest in thinking skill development in their entire lives. After 1 month, you'll notice the first improvements: faster bias recognition, stronger arguments, clearer analysis. After 3 months, the changes become undeniable. You think differently, decide better, see more clearly. After 6 months, others notice. They seek your judgment, trust your analysis, value your perspective. After 1 year, rigorous thinking operates automatically. You internalize the practices until they're no longer practices, but simply how you think. This is achievable, not through genius or special talent, but through disciplined practice over time. The mind you want is built through the hours you invest. 1 hour daily for 1 year equals 365 hours of deliberate critical thinking practice that transforms anyone's thinking from automatic and unreliable to conscious and rigorous, and eventually back to automatic, but now accurately automatic, reliably automatic, automatically excellent. The choice is yours. The framework is provided. The path is clear. Will you walk it? Epilogue. The compounding return on clear thinking. 1 year ago, you thought differently. You accepted claims without sufficient evidence. You defended positions without sound reasoning. You made decisions influenced by invisible biases. You reacted emotionally while believing you reasoned logically. You were confident in your thinking while being systematically wrong. You didn't know this at the time. That was the problem. Now, after 12 months of deliberate practice, after 365 hours invested in developing critical thinking capacity, after questioning hundreds of assumptions, constructing dozens of rigorous arguments, documenting daily reasoning, and confronting comfortable beliefs, you think differently. The transformation isn't about becoming a different person. It's about becoming more fully yourself. The you capable of reasoning clearly was always there. You simply hadn't trained the capacity. Like muscles and use, your critical thinking ability existed, but remained underdeveloped until you committed to systematic practice. What changed? Look back honestly at your thinking 1 year ago. Decisions you chose based on feelings masquerading as logic, social pressure disguised as preference, sunk costs pretending to be rational continuation. Now you identify the actual factors influencing choices and weigh them consciously. Beliefs you held positions inherited, absorbed, or adopted without examination. Many were false. Most were weakly supported. Now you maintain beliefs you can defend with evidence and sound reasoning, and you're comfortable saying, I don't know, when evidence is insufficient. Arguments. You confuse assertion with argumentation, volume with validity, passion with proof. Now you construct logical structures connecting evidence to conclusions, and you recognize when you or others fail to do so. Biases, they operated invisibly, distorting every perception and decision. Now you recognize them in real time, compensate for them consciously, and make substantially better judgments as a result. Self-awareness. You believe you saw yourself accurately while maintaining elaborate self-deceptions. Now you possess genuine self-knowledge, uncomfortable but truthful, about how your mind actually works. Intellectual humility. You're either arrogantly certain or paralyzed by doubt. Now you calibrate confidence to evidence, comfortable with proportional certainty and explicit uncertainty. These changes didn't happen through inspiration or insight. They accumulated through daily practice. 1 hour daily, repeated consistently, created compound returns that transformed your thinking fundamentally. The invisible advantage. Most people will never notice your intellectual development directly. They won't say, your reasoning has become remarkably rigorous. They won't comment on your improved bias recognition, but they'll notice the effects. They'll trust your judgment on complex matters because your track record of good decisions builds credibility. They'll seek your perspective on difficult problems because you analyze clearly when others get confused. They'll value your input in important decisions because your thinking adds genuine value. They'll respect your positions even when disagreeing, because your arguments withstand scrutiny. They'll change their minds when you present evidence because your reasoning is sound, not just persuasive. This creates professional advantage, social influence, and personal effectiveness that compounds over years. Good thinking opens doors. Poor thinking closes them. The differential accumulates. The cost of poor thinking. Consider what you avoided through improved thinking. Bad decisions prevented. How many poor choices would you have made with your old thinking patterns? Each avoided mistake saves time, money, relationships, opportunities. Manipulation resisted. How many times this year did you recognize when someone used cognitive biases against you in sales, marketing, political rhetoric, or personal manipulation? Each time you weren't fooled is value created. False beliefs abandoned. How many incorrect positions did you hold that would have continued distorting your worldview indefinitely? Each corrected belief improves every subsequent decision influenced by that domain. Wasted effort prevented. How many hours would you have spent pursuing ineffective solutions if you hadn't learned to analyze what actually matters? Each hour saved compounds over years. Conflicts avoided. How many arguments would have occurred if you hadn't learned to distinguish substantive disagreements from emotional reactions? Each prevented conflict preserves relationships and peace. The opportunity cost of poor thinking is staggering. Every person who doesn't develop critical thinking capacity pays these costs continuously. They just never realize it because they never experience the alternative. You now experience the alternative. You know what clear thinking feels like. You recognize poor reasoning instantly because it contrasts sharply with the baseline you've established. The ongoing practice. Automaticity doesn't mean ending practice. It means practice becomes sustainable and enjoyable rather than effortful and disciplined. You'll continue questioning assumptions not because you should, but because unexamined beliefs feel uncomfortable now. You'll keep constructing rigorous arguments not to prove anything, but because sloppy reasoning feels intellectually dishonest. You'll maintain bias awareness not through forced monitoring, but because biases are now visible where they were once invisible. You will persist in documentation not from discipline, but because examining your thinking has become genuinely interesting. You'll seek intellectual challenges not to improve, but because your mind craves good problems the way a trained athlete craves physical challenge. This is the ultimate success. When practice transforms from obligation to preference. When thinking clearly becomes intrinsically rewarding rather than instrumentally valuable. The next level. Critical thinking mastery isn't an endpoint. It's a foundation for additional development. Domain expertise. Apply your rigorous thinking to deep learning in specific fields. Become the rare person with both depth of knowledge and quality of reasoning. Creative thinking. Critical thinking provides a structure that makes genuine creativity possible. Weak thinking produces random ideas. Strong thinking produces novel connections between rigorously understood concepts. Teaching others. Share what you've learned. Teaching forces even deeper understanding, while helping others develop capacity you now possess. Complex problem solving. Tackle problems that require sustained rigorous analysis over months or years. Your developed capacity makes previously impossible problems merely difficult. Leadership. Lead others through complex decisions. Your thinking quality inspires trust and produces better organizational outcomes. Each of these builds on a foundation you constructed through 1 year of deliberate practice. The broader impact. Individual intellectual development creates collective benefits. Better conversations. When you think clearly, discussions become more productive. Others either raise their game or reveal their poor reasoning. Improved decisions. In families, organizations, and communities, one person thinking rigorously shifts group decision quality. Reduce polarization. Understanding reasoning structure and cognitive biases makes you immune to tribal thinking and capable of bridging divides. Truth-seeking culture. Modeling intellectual honesty encourages others to value truth over comfort, evidence over emotion, reason over rationalization. Knowledge advancement. Every person who thinks clearly contributes to humanity's collective understanding rather than adding to the noise. These effects ripple outward invisibly but powerfully. The honest assessment. Not everything improved perfectly. Be honest about persistent challenges. Some biases remain strong. Certain cognitive patterns resist correction despite awareness. This is normal. You're managing them better, even if you can't eliminate them entirely. Time pressure degrades thinking. Under severe stress or extreme time constraints, you sometimes revert to old patterns. Automaticity under ideal conditions doesn't guarantee perfect performance under pressure. Emotional intensity interferes. When deeply emotionally invested, even practice critical thinking can be overwhelmed. You're better at recognizing this now, even when you can't fully prevent it. Social pressure still influences. Being the lone dissenter in a confident group remains uncomfortable. You would stand it better now, but it's not effortless. Maintenance requires attention. If you completely abandon practice, skills will degrade gradually. Automaticity reduces required maintenance, but doesn't eliminate it entirely. These limitations aren't failures. They're realistic constraints of human cognition. Perfection isn't achievable. Substantial improvement is. You've achieved the latter. The ultimate question. Was it worth it? Did 365 hours invested in thinking development justify the time cost? Calculate honestly. Time invested, 365 hours over 1 year. Bad decisions prevented, countless hours and resources saved. Better decisions made, compound returns over remaining lifetime. Reduced manipulation, protection from exploitation that would have cost far more than 365 hours. Intellectual confidence. Earn certainty that you can think through complex problems. Professional advantage. Career benefits from being known for sound judgment. Personal satisfaction. Genuine enjoyment from thinking clearly. The return on investment is asymmetric, far higher than the input. And unlike most investments, the capacity developed continues generating return for life. The commitment forward. You've built critical thinking capacity to the point of automaticity. Now the question becomes, what will you do with it? Rigorous thinking is a tool. Tools serve purposes. What purposes will your thinking serve? Solving problems others find intractable? Making decisions with sustained good judgment? Leading others through complex situations? Creating knowledge through disciplined inquiry? Teaching others to think more clearly? building things that require sound reasoning to construct. The capacity is established. The application is your choice. The final reflection. You picked up this book because something wasn't working. Maybe you felt confused by complexity. Maybe you made decisions you regretted. Maybe you recognized you were being manipulated but didn't know how. Maybe you simply sensed you could think better but didn't know how to improve. That was the person you were 1 year ago. The person you are now possesses systematic capacity for questioning what should be questioned, analyzing what actually matters, constructing arguments that withstand scrutiny, recognizing biases that distort judgment, exercising analytical capabilities deliberately, reflecting on reasoning processes metacognitively, confronting weak arguments honestly, documenting thought processes comprehensively, practicing until rigorous thinking operates automatically. This capacity didn't exist 1 year ago. Now it does. That's a transformation from unconscious incompetence to unconscious competence through deliberate, consistent practice. The path forward. Continue the practices that built this capacity, not with the same intensity. That's unsustainable. But maintain the baseline that preserves automaticity. Continue questioning. Continue analyzing. Continue constructing sound arguments. Continue recognizing biases. Continue reflecting. Continue documenting. Continue practicing. Not because you must, but because you become someone for whom clear thinking is identity, not activity. This is who you are now. Someone who thinks clearly. That identity, earned through 365 hours of deliberate practice, maintained through consistent engagement, applied to problems that matter. That's the ultimate return on time invested in thinking development. 1 hour daily change your thinking fundamentally. The question now, how will your clear thinking change everything else? The capacity is yours. The application continues. Think clearly. Decide well. Live better. That's the promise of rigorous thinking. And you've now fulfilled your part by building the capacity. The rest is simply living the life that clear thinking makes possible. And